In a forest outside Seattle, Washington, a naked teenage boy woke up to find himself covered in slime, and he looked around at the surroundings with a lot of curiosity. A few moments later, he saw a rattlesnake coming close to bite him, but he calmly caught it mid-air and let it go. Because he was completely new to the place, the boy got up and started walking through the woods until he heard a sound. Thinking he had finally found someone, he followed the noise to a tent and looked inside, only to find a teenage couple inside screaming in shock, which made him run away. After that, the boy kept walking around and eventually reached the nearby city streets, where he was completely lost in the busy life around him while everyone around him looked at him weirdly since he had nothing to cover his naked body. Then, a few moments later, a police officer showed up and arrested him for having no clothes on in public and took him to a juvenile detention center. While the boy was at the facility, after some confusing moments in the shower, he managed to wash the slime off his skin and put on the clothes that were given to him. Then, Lou Daniels, the director of the detention center, met him and became very interested in his strange case. After learning about the boy, Lou immediately called a psychologist named Nicole Traeger to tell her about him.
What's going on?
Nobody knows where he came from exactly.
I'm on my way.
Nicole first said she would come by at 10 o'clock the next morning, but Lou asked her to come that very afternoon instead. Because of that, Nicole had to skip the Sunday breakfast she had planned with her husband, Stephen Traeger, and her children, Lori and Josh. Meanwhile, back at the detention center, the boy went to the cafeteria, where he picked up a tray of food and sat down to see what the others did with theirs. Then, after watching the people around him closely, he copied their movements and started eating his meal. At that moment, one of the kids nearby suddenly asked someone to bring some juice for him rudely. Feeling very glad to finally fix his hunger, the boy ate all of his food while watching the shouting boy earlier. A fight almost broke out, if not because of Lou, who came and told him to chill out, explaining that the boy could not understand anything they were saying.
You gonna see my fist, you gonna put an eyeball on me.
Be cool, Skeeter. Can't understand the words you say.
You keep staring at me, gonna have to kick his sorry ass.
Later in the yard, still annoyed, the same boy from the cafeteria showed up with his crew and challenged the mysterious boy to a fight. Not knowing what was going on, the boy could only mimic what the bully was doing, but then he was punched to the ground. Fortunately, Lou came shortly after to stop the fight. At that moment, despite getting a nosebleed from the punch, the boy barely felt the pain, but he also peed himself. Sometime later, Nicole arrived at the center and met with Lou, who told her about the boy's condition, including the fact that he had no belly button. Then, as Nicole quietly watched the boy, hoping he would show her where he came from and what he had seen, the boy instead drew her an accurate picture of the teenage couple he had seen in the forest before. Hoping to rescue the boy from the dangerous environment of the center, Nicole decided to let him stay at her house for a few days and told her family about her decision. The next day, Nicole brought the boy home, and here, she gave him the name Kyle. As soon as Kyle walked in, his attention fell on the baby pictures hanging on the wall, wondering if he had ever had a baby. Then, seeing Kyle's interest in the computer in the living room, she opened a cartoon game for him, which he soon mastered completely. However, a few minutes later, Nicole was called to work for an emergency, so she immediately left after telling Lori to keep an eye on Kyle. But then, Lori quickly got bored with keeping an eye on Kyle, so she began talking with her friends on the phone, and after that, she left to talk to her boyfriend, Declan. While alone, Kyle heard a beautiful melody from outside, so he immediately followed it to a neighbor's house and entered to find a girl named Amanda playing the piano. He stood still behind her, clearly amazed by the beautiful sound, and quietly cried until she saw him. Surprised, he quickly ran back home, got in the bathtub, and continued crying to himself. Later, Kyle got to know Josh, who was skeptical of him, before being introduced to Stephen. Then, Amanda's mother, Carol, suddenly showed up to complain about Kyle's intrusion at her house earlier that day. Upon knowing that, Nicole apologized to Carol. After that, Kyle joined the family for dinner. While eating, he got thirsty and, to the shock of everyone, he repeated the exact words of the bully from the detention center, loudly asking for some juice. He also added a few more confusing phrases he had overheard.
Yo, let's get some juice down here!
Later that evening, Nicole and Stephen discussed Kyle. Nicole explained how Kyle didn't have a belly button, and she mentioned that the social services promised to place him in a foster home for him by Monday. The next day, as Kyle left the house with Nicole and Josh, a mysterious man was seen watching them from across the street. Then at her office, Nicole gave Kyle an hour-long IQ test, which he completed in just 5 minutes with, surprisingly, a perfect score. Shocked, she quickly sent him for an MRI scan to see how his brain worked, and after the process, the staff looked confused by the results, finding out that Kyle was a genius, but couldn't make sure of it yet until further tests. That night, unable to fall asleep, Kyle snuck out of his room and went downstairs. At that moment, he became fascinated by the refrigerator and spent minutes just watching it. Then, he saw Lori, who was grounded by her father, sneaking out of the house to go to a party, so he decided to follow her. Shortly after they arrived at the party, Kyle got thirsty and accidentally got drunk on alcohol, which made him very sick. On the other hand, Lori found Declan cheating on her and got drunk to vent her anger. Soon, the police arrived and everyone frantically fled. In that moment, an officer managed to stop Lori and started dragging her away. Seeing that, desperate to rescue her, Kyle shocked everyone by walking right through a glass door and then humiliated the officer using his quick reflexes, which forced the officer to walk away and leave Lori. After that, Kyle carried Lori back home and got her into bed without anyone knowing. The next day, Kyle approached Nicole and told her how confused and scared he was about human interaction. Touched by this, she then talked to Steven, explaining that she could not bring herself to send Kyle away because there was something about him. Fortunately, Steven decided to let her decide what was best for Kyle. So, Nicole immediately went to the detention center to get Kyle's files to find more info about him, but Lou told her that they had all been lost. Meanwhile, the mysterious man who watched Kyle the other day was parked outside the center while reading Kyle's documents, revealing that he was the one who stole them. Meanwhile, at home, while Steven worked, Kyle walked around the house. Then, Steven accidentally lost his work data after an error and got frustrated. Seeing that, Kyle showed his amazing skill by duplicating the codes on a laptop and recovered all of the lost data in just a few seconds. On the other side of the house, Josh went to his room and found an adult magazine that his mother had hidden from him. At that moment, he realized that it was Kyle who had helped him find it, so he went to thank him and invited him to play basketball with him. Later that evening, the Tragers gathered together for dinner. At that moment, Nicole asked if everyone wouldn't mind if Kyle stayed with them a while longer. Fortunately, everyone agreed to let Kyle stay, and that made Kyle feel welcome in his new home. One night, Kyle stayed up until late at night, wondering how humans could sleep when there were so many things to explore. Then, driven by curiosity, he went downstairs and checked the fridge, tasting any food he could find there. After that, once he was full, he accidentally turned on a Chinese karate movie on the TV, and he became interested in it. Soon, everyone in the house was woken up by the sound, and when they went downstairs to see what was going on, they were shocked to see that Kyle was performing the karate moves and speaking Chinese fluently. Although he was surprised, Steven still scolded him for making so much noise and causing trouble late that night. Nicole then asked if he had been having trouble sleeping lately, only to be surprised when Kyle said that he had never slept before. After returning to the bedroom, Kyle spent the rest of the night wondering why humans were obsessed with the concept of time. Then, when the morning came, he kept observing everyone in the house racing with time as he had breakfast with Josh. At that moment, he was fascinated to see Josh peel a banana before eating it, so he did the same thing and enjoyed the taste. Later that day, a detective named Breen visited Kyle to interview him. Breen asked him if he remembered why he was not wearing any clothes when the police found him, but Kyle replied that he did not remember ever having any clothes in his life. Then, after the interview, Breen told Nicole that Kyle was very strange because he was not in the missing kid report, and his description was not found anywhere. Meanwhile, at school, Lori and her friend, Hillary, approached Declan to confront him for cheating on her at the party earlier. They told him they saw him kissing another girl, but Declan tried to defend himself by claiming that the girl was the one who forced him to kiss. However, Lori refused to hear his excuse and just left him somewhere else. To fix Kyle's sleeping problem, Nicole took him to see a doctor named Dr. Stone and showed the doctor Kyle's unusual MRI results. Dr. Stone then looked over the paperwork, but he was skeptical, saying that the result of the MRI showed a lot of brain activity, which was not normal for any human. He then gave Kyle a thorough physical examination, but when he checked on his belly and noticed the missing belly button, he was surprised. He then prescribed sleeping pills, saying that it might help with the problem. As Dr. Stone walked Nicole out of his office and reached the reception area, they were amazed to see a crowd applauding Kyle because he had just finished a complex jigsaw puzzle in only a few minutes. At home, Josh came up with wild theories to explain Kyle's situation. He told his mother that Kyle was not human, but Nicole clearly refused to believe that. Then, ignoring Josh's wild imagination, she sat down to talk to Kyle. She explained that sometimes people have trouble sleeping because they are concerned about something, so she gave him some paper and asked him to draw anything at all that came to his mind. Later that evening, Steven and Nicole tried to inspect the drawings that Kyle had created. Upon seeing them, Steven was surprised by how good the drawings were, saying that it was like Kyle took a picture and printed it onto the paper. Then, hoping to calm Kyle, Nicole made him some hot chamomile tea. At that moment, Kyle watched the pot closely and soon became really interested in the bubbling sound it made, and after that, they drank the tea. Once they finished their drinks, Kyle and Josh went to their room, and the two boys bonded over video games until Steven and Nicole arrived to check on them. Nicole then handed over the medicine from Dr. Stone, telling Kyle that he had to get some sleep and that the pill would help him. After that, she wished the two good night and left them to sleep. However, even after taking the pill, Kyle was still unable to sleep, and instead of trying, he suddenly had an urge to explore the surroundings, so he quietly left the house. He then spent several minutes staring up at the beauty of the stars in the night sky. After that, Kyle went for a walk down the street, and the mysterious man in the truck was slowly following him. Fortunately, a dog started barking loudly, which forced the stalker to leave. Soon after, Amanda saw Kyle from her bedroom window and called out to ask what he was doing out there so late, and Kyle simply replied that he could not sleep. After that short chat, Kyle returned home, but he accidentally bumped into Lori in the living room, and shortly after, Stephen and Nicole walked downstairs and caught them, asking why Lori was awake. Lori tried to cover up her plan to go outside by claiming that she heard Kyle downstairs and just wanted to make sure he was okay. However, Stephen didn't seem to believe her, especially since she had full makeup on, so he just told the two of them to get upstairs immediately. The next day, Nicole called Dr. Stone to tell him that the sleeping pill he gave her the other day had not worked at all. Meanwhile, after being fired from her waitressing job for missing a shift, Lori hung out with Declan. On the other hand, Stephen took Kyle out running to make him tired, hoping that he would finally sleep. However, Stephen was the first to get tired, while Kyle managed to run at such a fast pace without getting tired. Seeing that his plan had failed miserably, he decided to return home, where he found Nicole inspecting Kyle's drawings. She then told him that she was going to stay up and watch Kyle to make sure he did not wander out again. Upon hearing that, Stephen proposed that they go in shifts instead, offering to take the first watch. Later at midnight, Nicole took over the guarding duty from Stephen because he had an important meeting in the morning. After that, Nicole went to check on Kyle, who then told her that he actually felt tired, but his head just could not stop thinking. So, to help him relax, she suggested that he try counting backwards from 100,000, hoping he would grow bored and fall asleep. However, when the morning came, Nicole, who overslept, woke up late and found that Kyle was still awake and was not done yet counting. Frustrated, she then confided in Stephen, but Stephen, who was also frustrated, told her that they should have found a foster home for Kyle, saying that he didn't belong with them. Hurt by what Kyle had just overheard, he quietly left the house, causing the Tragers to panic and begin searching for him. However, despite a search assisted by the police, they still couldn't find him. As the hours passed, Nicole became desperate, but then she suddenly realized something and said that she might actually know where Kyle was. The Tragers then rushed to the forest, and they were incredibly relieved to find Kyle standing on top of a large tree stump there. Nicole then asked him what he was doing there. Kyle then said that he returned to the place he first found himself so his family could find him. That was when Stephen finally realized his mistake and said that the family Kyle was waiting for had shown up to take him home. Once they returned home, Kyle, who seemed exhausted, went to the bathroom to get a shower washed up in the bathroom. Stephen then showed up and noticed how tired Kyle was, saying that this might be the night he would finally fall asleep. He said that he just needed to find the perfect place to sleep. So, Kyle went around the house, found a radio, and turned it on the white noise frequency, which instantly soothed his mind. Then, when Stephen and Nicole returned to check on him a bit later, they were relieved to find him peacefully sleeping inside the empty bathtub for the first time in almost 2 weeks. The next morning, despite the family's best efforts to wake Kyle up, he slept like a log. Lori then complained because she needed to use the bathroom, so Stephen turned on the shower to wake Kyle up. After that, Nicole packed a bag for Kyle and prepared him to go to work with Stephen for the day, while Josh packed his things and prepared to leave for summer school. Moments later, Detective Breen called Nicole on the phone. Thinking the detective might have leading information to find out who Kyle was, Nicole eagerly asked, and that was when Breen delivered some shocking news, explaining that it looked like Kyle might actually be connected to a murder case. He also added that a strange symbol had been found on a security keycard near some human remains discovered deep in the woods. Elsewhere at the office, Stephen and Kyle arrived only to find all the employees stressing out over a server crash that had brought the system down. Upon knowing that, Stephen immediately left Kyle with the secretary and quickly headed into a meeting with the CEO. Meanwhile, outside the meeting room, Kyle wandered around the office until he found the server room, where he sat down and started reading the bulky computer manuals. At the same time, after the meeting, Stephen found out that Kyle was missing, so he quickly searched the halls with his secretary, and the two were shocked to find Kyle sitting on the floor of the server room with the dismantled computer parts in his hands. Afraid that this brought more problems for the office, Stephen rushed out to call a technician to help fix the server, but when they arrived, they found out that Kyle had managed to fix the server. Later at home, Nicole found Kyle drawing while sitting inside the empty bathtub and said that they could put another bed back in Josh's room since Kyle had managed to get some sleep, but Kyle refused, saying that he liked the tub more. After that, Nicole showed him a photo of the strange symbol found on the security card from the police investigation. However, Kyle said that he had no idea what the symbol was. Later that day, Josh asked his father for permission to play video games instead of studying. Stephen clearly refused, warning his son that if he did not pass summer school, he would not be able to go to high school next year with his friends. Shortly after, Lori showed up. Stephen then asked her to take Kyle with her during the day, but Lori refused, saying that she had to work and wouldn't be able to keep her eyes on Kyle. Later, Nicole took Stephen out to his workshop in the garage and told him about her conversation with Detective Breen about the murder in the forest. However, unbeknownst to them, Kyle's stalker was listening to their conversation. Meanwhile, upstairs, Josh bribed Kyle with his favorite candy to get him to do his summer school math test. The next morning, thinking that Lori had taken Kyle with her to work as she was asked, everyone left the house, not knowing that Kyle was actually still asleep in the tub. It turned out that Lori had left the house alone and met up with Hillary to spy on Declan. He had previously told Lori that he would be playing golf with his father, so she wanted to check if he was lying. As expected, after waiting for a few minutes, Lori confirmed her suspicions when she saw Declan hanging out with his friends and not his father. Meanwhile, at home, Kyle woke up and felt hurt that no one had noticed he was left behind. Then, as he wandered around the house, he saw that the satellite TV was not working, so he climbed onto the roof to fix it because he hoped to find a way to make himself useful. Then, after fixing the satellite dish, he suddenly jumped off the roof, and Amanda, who was driving nearby, saw that. She was so shocked that she crashed her car into the trash cans. She then looked at her damaged car and panicked, realizing that she was going to be grounded by her mother. On the other hand, Lori arrived shortly after and took Kyle inside. Elsewhere, Kyle's stalker received a phone call from an unknown person, and he explained that he needed more time to cover his tracks. Upon hearing that, the voice on the other end sounded angry and told him to do a better job of it before hanging up. Meanwhile, inside the house, Lori asked Kyle to change his clothes and told him to lie to her father that she had brought him with her to her work. Soon after, Amanda showed up to ask for help to fix her car, but Lori told her to just tell her mother that someone had caused the scratch. Later that day, during dinner, Kyle was surprised to see that Lori and Josh lied pretty easily. Lori told her parents that Kyle sat near her counter and drew the whole time, while Josh bragged that he had passed the test. Upon hearing all of these lies, Kyle spoke up and revealed the truth, explaining that he took the test for Josh and that he was never actually with Lori because he was home all by himself. Later that evening, hoping to cheer Kyle up, Stephen followed him onto the roof. At that moment, Kyle explained that all he wanted to do was help the family, but Stephen told him that lying was not the right way to do things. At the same time, Nicole had a talk with Lori in her bedroom. Lori finally came clean that she was afraid to tell her parents that she had been fired from her job. Nicole comforted her, saying that she understood what she felt. Then, inspired by his discussion with Kyle, Stephen called his boss to stand up against the company's unfair plans to cut budgets. On the other hand, Carol scolded Amanda after finding out that she crashed the car. But suddenly, Kyle showed up after seeing the argument and claimed that he was the one who broke the car, realizing that this lie was necessary to help his friend. After that, he returned home. At home, Lori approached him to apologize, explaining that she did not mean the mean things she said and admitted she should never have asked him to cover for her mistakes. Upon hearing that, Kyle just smiled and told her that it was okay. The next morning, Stephen and Nicole woke Kyle up and surprised him by showing him Stephen's workshop that they had converted into his new bedroom, and they had even placed a comfortable bathtub right in the middle as his bed, since he liked to sleep inside one. Surprised and finally feeling like he belonged in the family, Kyle thanked them. After that, when Nicole was about to hang Kyle's drawings on the wall, she noticed a strange pattern across the different pages, so she laid them on the floor and was shocked to see that the separate images fit together to form the exact symbol from the security card. That night, for the very first time, Kyle had a dream where he saw himself swimming with Amanda, and that dream made him wonder if it was showing past events or predicting the future. The next morning, Nicole called Detective Breen to show him the drawing. She thought that the drawings could be pieces of his past that were finally starting to enter his consciousness. Shortly after, Lori was ordered to take Kyle and Josh to the community pool, while Stephen and Nicole headed to the high school to register Kyle for classes. Elsewhere, the mysterious man, whose name was finally revealed to be Tom Foss, met with a personnel manager named Dennis at his office to quit his job. He then handed Dennis his security card, which had the exact symbol from the crime scene printed on it, before leaving the office. Meanwhile, at the community pool, Lori hung out with Hillary. On the other hand, Kyle asked Josh about the lifeguard chair and asked why Amanda was sitting up there. So, Josh explained that she would jump into the water to save him if he could not swim, meaning she worked as the lifeguard. Elsewhere at the high school, Stephen and Nicole met with the principal, Mr. Hooper, to get Kyle registered. Mr. Hooper then looked at their paperwork and noticed that they were requesting a one-on-one tutor for Kyle, which was a very difficult request. However, Nicole countered by saying that the school was obligated to provide it for a student with his specific needs. Meanwhile, back at the pool, hoping to get closer to Amanda, Kyle jumped straight into the deep part of the pool, and Amanda jumped immediately to pull him safely to the surface. At that moment, the close physical contact excited him, causing a little scene. Lori noticed that and quickly told him to cover himself up immediately. Later that day at home, Josh told his parents exactly what had happened at the pool, which forced Steven to have a private talk with Kyle in his room. Steven gently explained that he had just experienced an erection, and Kyle admitted that he had never had one before, or at least not that he could remember. Upon hearing that, Steven explained to him that it was completely normal for a growing teenager, but he added that it was not appropriate to happen in public. The next day, Declan came to Lori's house and politely asked her out on a date, which surprised her. Then, after a brief chat, the two decided to go to an upcoming party together. Later that afternoon, Amanda came to the house and headed straight to Kyle's room, hoping to talk to him about what had happened at the pool, but once she got inside, she saw the pictures Kyle had drawn of her and felt creeped out by all the sketches. She became panicked and ran out of the room. On the other hand, Josh made his parents an offer to make sure someone was looking after Kyle. He explained that the pool offered swimming lessons for a couple of hours every day, which would get Kyle occupied. Then, once their parents agreed, Lori gave Josh the phone number of his big crush, Ashley. It turned out that they had agreed on signing Kyle up for the swimming lessons, which were being taught by Amanda. The next day, despite being very nervous to train with Amanda after scaring her away, Kyle mastered the skill of swimming in just a few minutes. He quickly started swimming back and forth like an athlete. After that, Amanda approached him to congratulate him on his amazing progress, and in that moment, she invited him to come by her house because she wanted to show him something special. Elsewhere, Foss returned to his home and found Dennis waiting for him inside. Dennis then held up the security card and explained that he had run it through the system to deactivate it. He then threatened Foss, stating he had a strong feeling that Foss was secretly doing something fishy and he did not want the company to know what it was. The next day, Kyle went over to Amanda's house, where she showed him some of her father's beautiful paintings. She then explained that art is about drawing what you feel, not just what you see. Kyle listened and admitted he did not know he could actually make a picture of how he felt inside, so when he returned home, he tried doing so. Meanwhile, Josh finally made up his mind to call Ashley on the phone. He introduced himself as Josh, and they made a plan to meet at an upcoming party that night. After that, Josh asked Kyle to go to the party with him. Upon hearing that, Kyle decided to go and bring a brand new portrait he had drawn for Amanda, hoping to give it to her at the event so he could finally tell her his feelings for her. However, as they were about to leave, Nicole stopped them and forbade them from going. Fortunately, Steven wasn't on her side and instead told them to have their good time at the party. Meanwhile, at the same time, Foss invited Dennis to negotiate, but then he suddenly killed Dennis to keep his secrets safe. Shortly after, Kyle, Josh, and Lori arrived at the big party. Before letting the two boys go on their own, Lori reminded them not to drink, and that they had to be out of there by 9:45. Soon after, Ashley appeared, greeted Josh warmly, and led him away to the jacuzzi, where they hung out together, but they has to cut their time short because the adults soon scolded them and told them not to use the jacuzzi. Meanwhile, Lori snuck away to the bushes with Declan and had an intimate moment there, but she soon regretted it. Feeling awful about what had happened, she then returned to the main party area, where she was shocked to find Hillary, who was drunk, hitting on Kyle. She quickly stepped in and yelled at Hillary to get off of him, but Hillary snapped back with a mean comment. At home, Steven apologized to Nicole about their past arguments regarding Kyle. He realized that he should have handled him just like they handled Josh and Lori. Later that evening, Amanda arrived at the party with her boyfriend Charlie. Upon seeing them together, Kyle's heart was broken, and he sadly threw his beautiful drawing right into the swimming pool. Then, with the party going bad for Kyle, Josh, and Lori, they decided to leave early and head back home. A few days later, on the first day of school, Steven and Nicole congratulated each other for making it through the summer after everything that had happened to them. Since the kids would be away at school all day, they planned to spend a few hours of quality time alone together in the afternoon. Nicole then drove the kids to school while Steven went to work. However, unbeknownst to them, Foss was watching them from afar, and as soon as everyone left, he broke into the empty house. At school, Kyle was stunned by everything he saw around him. He then wondered if he would ever find someone like him. On the other hand, Lori tried to make peace with Hillary. However, Hillary refused to forgive her. She even ridiculed Lori's appearance despite wearing the same blouse. Meanwhile, Josh learned that he had been placed in remedial classes because of his grades. He was totally devastated by that, but he tried to hide his sadness and joked it off with his friends who weren't in remedial class. Sometime later, while Kyle tried to digest everything he saw at school, Nicole had a private meeting with Mr. Hooper to finalize the enrollment details. During the meeting, Mr. Hooper told her that because Kyle had spent time at a juvenile detention center, the school wanted him to do a 5-hour-long test to see if he was ready for school. On the other hand, Lori attended a math class, where the teacher wrote a complicated equation on the board and said that if anyone could solve that problem by the end of the semester, they would get an A in his class. At that moment, Hillary passed a note to Lori, but the teacher caught her, and she was sent to detention. Meanwhile, in the remedial class, Josh was asked to read out loud. However, unlike his new classmates who struggled with the words, he read them perfectly, but his success got the attention of a boy named Toby. Elsewhere, Kyle was given the first part of the 5-hour test, which was history, but as he went through the questions, he realized he did not recognize any of the names and dates on the paper. Shortly after that, he heard the bell ring, signaling the end of the period, so he left the exam room and wandered around until he found himself inside Lori's empty math class. He was happy to see the math problem on the board, so he picked up a marker and solved it pretty easily. During lunch, Kyle went to the cafeteria and tried to find a place to sit. He approached a social outcast named LK and noticed that the boy was drawing something, so he said that he drew too. Meanwhile, Toby overheard Josh making fun of the remedial class to his old friends, which made him mad. On the other hand, Nicole prepared to spend the afternoon with Steven, not knowing that Foss was still hiding inside the house. Then, when she received a phone call from Steven happily said that he was happy that they finally had some alone time together, but then Nicole heard a strange noise downstairs. Terrified, she immediately told her husband that someone might have broken into their house. Upon hearing that, Steven returned home as fast as he could from his office, barged into the house, and frantically looked for his wife. Fortunately, he found her in Kyle's bedroom with Foss. Steven demanded to know what was going on, and Foss explained that he was on patrol for a local security company when he saw someone breaking their window. However, Steven didn't believe Foss that easily, so he called their security company to check Foss's background. From the staff, he found out that Foss was indeed a new employee who had just started this week, and that he had an impressive military background as a decorated veteran. At school, LK showed Kyle the library, where Kyle then spent the next couple of hours quickly reading through encyclopedias to learn many new things. Shortly after, Amanda approached him and asked if he had romantic feelings for her, but knowing what she would prefer to hear, Kyle assured her that he only thought of her as a friend, and nothing more. Meanwhile, Toby confronted Josh for his rude comments, and a fight broke out. Fortunately, before things got much worse, Kyle stepped in and defended Josh. Unfortunately, Mr. Hooper saw what happened, and that changed his decision, thinking that his school wouldn't want a student like Kyle. On the other hand, Lori arrived at the detention and found her math teacher, who was staring at the board in amazement and wondering who had solved the equation. Knowing that only Kyle would be able to do it, Lori offered to tell him who the person was as long as she was excused from detention. Excited to know who it was, the math teacher agreed. Lori then said that the person was in Mr. Hooper's office. The math teacher then barged straight into Mr. Hooper's office and said that Kyle had just solved a grad school-level math problem. He then said that he wanted to have Kyle in his class. However, Mr. Hooper said that Kyle couldn't be enrolled since he couldn't finish his exam. Upon hearing that, Kyle explained that he simply did not know the answers before, but he had finally known them all after reading the library books. Then, Nicole and Steven pleaded with Mr. Hooper to give Kyle another chance to take the test. Mr. Hooper noted that the rules required the exam to be completed in 5 hours after the test was given for the scores to be valid, and he pointed out that there were only 30 minutes left of the school day. However, Kyle was confident that he would finish them in time. Meanwhile, outside the building, Lori approached Declan to apologize for lashing out at him, but before they could talk more, Hillary walked up, ignored Lori, and told Declan that they were going for coffee. Fortunately, Declan refused her, and that made Lori happy. A few minutes later, Mr. Hooper was shocked because Kyle had finished the test. He was clearly impressed, and he decided to have Kyle in his school. Before leaving the school, Kyle approached LK to thank him for helping him out today. LK smiled and told him it was no worries. Then, impressed by everything Kyle had done during the day, LK gave him a special drawing he had made of him dressed up as a superhero. Sincerely touched by the kind gesture, Kyle took the picture home and hung it on his bedroom wall. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to anyone, Foss, who had bugged the Traegers' house earlier, watched each of their moves from his apartment. On one stormy night, Kyle had a nightmare where he saw a bearded man staring at him, and he jolted up in shock. Then, just seconds later, his fear worsened when he heard a knock on his window, and he saw a dark figure in a cloak standing behind it. Hesitantly, he approached the window, opened it, and was incredibly relieved to see that it was actually Declan, so he quickly let him inside. He then gave Declan a blanket and a pillow before returning to his bathtub bed, while Declan slept on the floor right next to him. In the morning, Kyle told Lori about Declan, Upon hearing that, Lori panicked and asked what Declan was doing there. She said that her parents would think that he was trying to sneak into her bedroom, and that was a bad thing, so he asked Declan to leave immediately. Lori tried to lead Declan out without her parents knowing, but then Nicole suddenly called her from the kitchen to wish her a happy birthday, because it turned out that that day was Lori's birthday. Lori awkwardly thanked her mother, while Kyle tried to lead Declan out. However, they were stopped by Steven. Fortunately, Declan got an idea by pretending that he had just arrived from outside. His lie worked, and he joined the family for breakfast, where he politely complimented Nicole on the delicious pancakes. Nicole smiled, explaining that they were Lori's favorite, and said that they made them every single year to celebrate her birthday. At that moment, Kyle wondered why he did not have any memories of his own birthday. Seeing Kyle deep in thought, Nicole approached him to check on him. She asked if he was having bad dreams lately, and Kyle quickly confirmed it. She then comforted him, explaining that every information from his head might be the key to unlock his past. Later that day, the bearded guy from his dream kept hunting Kyle's mind, so he drew a detailed portrait of the mysterious man and gave it to Nicole. She then looked at the portrait with concern, asking if he saw this person in his dream last night. Kyle confirmed it, while also saying that the image kept popping up in his mind. Then, the power suddenly went out, so Steven went outside to check the fuse box. However, he was shocked to see muddy shoe prints right around Kyle's bedroom window, along with some traces of blood. Worried, he then looked around to check what was going on, but he was suddenly interrupted by Foss. Steven then explained the situation to him, saying that Kyle had drawn a detailed picture of someone staring in at him from that window. Upon hearing that, Foss looked surprised, and he suggested that he should probably take a look at the sketch himself to help investigate. Meanwhile, inside the house, Declan visited Lori in her room to check on her. At that moment, Lori noticed a mark on his head and asked what had happened, but he said that it was nothing she had to worry about. On the other hand, not wanting to be completely alone in her own house during the blackout, Amanda came over to visit and kept Kyle company by sitting with him inside his bathtub bed. Shortly after, upon showing Foss Kyle's drawing, Steven started to wonder who Kyle really was. Foss then stared at the picture and said that it was super detailed for just a simple memory. After that, shocked by how much Kyle had recalled about his past, Foss rushed out of the house and called his associate, warning them that Kyle was starting to remember his past. After that, hoping to know who was lurking outside Kyle's window, Foss went back to his apartment and reviewed the security camera footage. Then, as he saw Declan climbing through the window on the tape, he received another phone call from his employer. Later that evening, hoping to keep themselves busy during the blackout, the teenagers decided to play board games. Kyle then chose the Ouija board and asked it when his birthday was. Josh thought that the Ouija board might actually work, but Declan clearly thought it was impossible. The board then gave a series of numbers, which were 7, 8, 1, 2, 2, and 7. Then, to their surprise, the heavy rain suddenly stopped outside. However, Kyle suddenly told everyone to get inside immediately, and as they walked back inside, the lightning suddenly struck the ground. As everyone tried to understand what all the strange events meant, Josh continued spinning his wild alien theories to his roommate. He explained that Kyle might be an alien-human hybrid. Fed up with Josh's nonsense, Kyle finally snapped, yelling that he just wanted to know who he really was. Shocked to see Kyle in sadness, Nicole told everyone to leave her and Kyle alone. She then sat down and comforted him, and he eventually calmed down. Later, Foss came over to inform Steven and Nicole of the information he found. He explained that according to the police, there was a hit-and-run accident nearby around 2 a.m., and one of the drivers had fled the scene of the crime. Upon hearing this, Lori pulled Declan aside and asked him about the incident. Cornered, Declan finally confessed to her, explaining that he was on his way home in the heavy storm when it became really hard to see, causing him to skid and hit another car. He admitted that he couldn't go home, because his father would be really mad if he found out about that, so he panicked and ran to their house instead. Meanwhile, frustrated to find his own past, Kyle returned to his room and began pulling his drawings off the wall. Fortunately, Amanda came into the room and comforted him during his breakdown. The two then sat together inside the bathtub, where Amanda shared some stories about her father to make him feel better. On the other hand, Declan decided to leave after his talk with Lori. But before he left, he told Lori that even though it was Hillary who pushed him to make up with Lori, it was he who realized how he didn't want to lose her. Thanks to that, the atmosphere between them was lifted a bit. Later that evening, after Nicole baked Lori a birthday cake, the family prepared to celebrate. At that moment, Lori looked at Kyle and offered to share her special day with him until he remembered when his real birthday was. The two then made a wish and blew out the candles together. Soon after, Amanda suddenly gave him a sweet kiss on the cheek. The next morning, Kyle saw a missing person report in the newspaper. The man was a Washington University professor named William Kern, and as he looked at the photo, He was shocked because he was the exact bearded man from his nightmares, and he quickly informed Stephen and Nicole about the discovery. Upon hearing that, Nicole immediately called Detective Breen to convey the information. Then, when the detective checked the pictures taken from the crime scene, the same number Kyle got from the Ouija board was clearly seen printed on one of evidence. For the next couple of days, Kyle kept wondering why he could dream about someone he never knew, but then Nicole told him not to be stressed about it, so he went outside and played basketball with Josh and the others. After seeing how the boys played, Kyle then tried to shoot himself, and he managed to score points after points easily. He was then asked by Charlie, who was also there, to come for a practice and maybe join the team. After that, Josh taught Kyle everything about basketball to help him blend in with the other players, and the next day, Lori dropped him off for his first team practice. However, she then got into another fight with Hillary. On the other hand, Declan found out that Kyle was about to join the team. Not wanting Kyle to join, he asked Charlie to think about it again, but Charlie ignored him and instead tried to convince the coach to give Kyle a chance to show his skill, saying that he would always put the ball into the net every time he shot. Moments later, their conversation was interrupted by loud cheers coming from the courts, and when the coach checked what happened, he saw Kyle making impressive shots from distances, which immediately impressed him. In the end, he changed his mind and would let Kyle join his team. Later at home, everyone congratulated Kyle for successfully joining the team. They then excitedly discussed the upcoming championship game against a rival school, whom their team, the Bisons, had lost in the final. Later that evening, Stephen and Nicole discussed the ongoing murder case in the kitchen. At that moment, Nicole explained that she had been reading about Professor Kern, and she found out that most of the professor's research was focused on the human brain to maximize its full potential, thinking there might be a connection to Kyle's condition. On the other hand, Foss received a call from his associate, who warned him that William Kern had made it into the news, and the person was afraid that the police were going to find out about their secret. The next day, at school, confident about Kyle's ability, Josh made some bets with other students to make money. Then at home, hoping to help Kyle play better, he gave him several books to read about basketball rules, told him about the greatest basketball players of all time, and played some basketball videos for him to study. One evening, Charlie and Declan came over to see Kyle and discuss the strategy for the upcoming match. That moment, seeing Declan at the front door, Lori quickly changed out of her pajamas, put on fresh makeup, and pulled him aside to talk. The two then hung out for a few moments until Hillary suddenly arrived at the house uninvited and asked Declan to spend time with her instead. Annoyed to be caught in a fight between two friends, Declan decided to ignore them and left with Charlie. Later, during practice, Declan tried to outshine Kyle on the court, but he ended up falling so hard that he injured his ankle. After the practice, Lori came to pick Kyle up, and that was when she got furious after seeing Hillary hanging out with Declan. She immediately interrupted their chat and asked Declan out on a date just to make Hillary jealous. On the other hand, Foss stopped at a deserted road and picked up a drug addict off the streets. Meanwhile, back at the house, Stephen and Nicole were spending their free time together, but they were suddenly interrupted when they saw shocking news on the TV. The news anchor explained that the police had identified the human remains found in the woods as William Kern, who was the same missing professor that had been haunting Kyle in his nightmare. Shocked by that, Nicole immediately called Detective Breen, but no one picked up. She finally told Stephen that the professor from the news was the same person Kyle kept seeing in his dream, and he was able to draw his face perfectly, meaning he must have known the professor in his past. The next day, at the championship game, the Bisons prepared to face their opponent. Soon, the game started pretty well for the Bisons, and Kyle scored several points. However, after a few minutes, Kyle began losing the ball, making the coach concerned. And to make matters worse for them, Declan, who was their ace, got injured so badly that he was barely able to stand. However, despite that, the coach still ordered him to play, saying that if he decided to stop playing, he would never be played again for the rest of the season. The coach realized that he had no choice but to change Declan, but Kyle refused to play, saying that he was also injured, suggesting that he wasn't going to let the coach be unfair to Declan. Charlie also supported Declan by saying that he was also injured, and the rest of the team followed. Because of that, the team had to lose the match by forfeit to support their injured friend. Elsewhere, Nicole went directly to the police station to find Detective Breen, and when she arrived, she found out that someone had died last night. When the picture was seen, it turned out that the deceased was the drug addict that Foss met the other night. The detective also mentioned that the man had a record of attempted murder and assault, and the police believed that he was the one who had killed the professor. Later that evening, while Foss watched the Tragers through his hidden cameras from his apartment, he saw Nicole talking to Kyle about Professor William. Meanwhile, Stephen found out about Josh's betting and scolded him because it was not right to do so. He then ordered Josh to sell some of his favorite video games immediately to pay back all the money he owed to the other students. Somewhere else, Lori went to meet Hillary to have a serious talk with her. When they met at the gym, Lori explained that she came to tell her that she was not going to fight with her over Declan anymore because their friendship mattered more. Hillary was surprised to hear that, and finally they made up. The next day, Declan approached Kyle to thank him for standing up to the coach. After that, he invited Kyle to play basketball. That night, Kyle saw a clear memory in his nightmare as Foss killed Professor William in the woods. The next morning, seeing Kyle getting frustrated with his memory loss, Nicole decided to bring a hypnotherapist to help him remember his past. Upon knowing that, Kyle excitedly agreed to get started right away. Then, as Nicole set up a tape recorder on the table, Kyle was already hypnotized. He began shivering and remembered that he was sitting inside a car in the forest when he watched Foss murder Professor William. However, when the therapist asked him to remember anything that happened before that, Kyle began shaking violently and uttered gibberish. Seeing that, Nicole got scared and asked the hypnotherapist to stop. Later that evening, Stephen and Nicole discussed Kyle's hypnosis session in private. Nicole explained how anxious Kyle was when he talked about Foss. Meanwhile, Kyle started to get impatient because he hadn't been able to find the answer to his memory loss. Then, he happened to overhear Declan's plan to visit the University of Washington to check out the campus, so he eagerly asked to join him on the trip, knowing that Professor William used to teach there. Because of that, Lori suddenly came up with a clever plan to get permission by telling her parents that Kyle needed to get a break from his case, and visiting the University of Washington might help with that. Fortunately, because Kyle really wanted to go there, they were finally allowed to go. The next afternoon, Foss visited Nicole at home. Meanwhile, Kyle, Declan, and Lori finally started their trip to the university. And long story short, once they arrived, Kyle and Lori met Professor Williams' research assistant, a woman named Anna. Lori then explained Kyle's condition, saying that he had amnesia and that one of the few people he remembered from his past was the late professor. Upon hearing that, Anna looked skeptical, but Kyle begged for a chance to prove himself. Curious about his claim, Anna finally accepted his request, and after the tests, she was left in shock because his results were greatly beyond human range. Then, as Kyle looked around the laboratory office, he was shocked to see an old photograph in the cupboard there. The photo itself showed biochemistry graduate students from 1985, and what surprised him was that one of them looked exactly like him. Upon seeing that, convinced that they were close to finding the answers, Lori called Stephen and convinced him to let them stay overnight at the university. Later that evening, as the three hung out, Lori saw Declan talking and flirting with another college girl, and she became annoyed by his behavior, so she walked away to explore the campus with another boy she met. Meanwhile, back at home, Nicole decided to take Josh's advice. She then slowed down the recorded audio of the strange gibberish from Kyle's hypnotherapy session and learned that Kyle was actually mentioning a series of numbers and letters repeatedly. Curious about the discovery, she then played the recording for Stephen. Upon hearing that, Stephen agreed that it sounded like some sort of code. However, they didn't know what the codes meant. On the other hand, at the university, Anna found Kyle sitting alone while looking around, so she sat down to join him. She then told him that if Professor William was still alive, he would have been so excited to meet him. Later that night, Kyle woke up in their motel room, just as Declan finally returned. At that moment, Declan looked annoyed because Lori was still out late on campus with another boy. Early the next morning, Anna visited Kyle in his room to deliver news about the old photograph. She explained that she had found out the identity of the guy in the photo, who turned out to be Adam Balin. Then, after Lori returned to the room, the three teenagers joined Anna and headed out to speak with the university's old department secretary to find information about Adam, only to find out that Adam had been missing for over 20 years. Meanwhile, back at the house, Stephen finally cracked the code, and he immediately told Nicole about it. He said that it was a coordinate for latitude and longitude, but when he checked it, the location was completely blocked on the digital map. Back at the university, the three teenagers searched through old Adam's research documents, but couldn't find any information. However, just when they were about to give up, Kyle found a drawing of the mysterious symbol, and it was the exact same one he had subconsciously drawn before, along with a long series of numbers. Later that afternoon, Stephen found out that the kids had lied about their plans, so he immediately called Lori to confront her. But before her father could speak, Lori immediately read the numbers from the document, explaining that they were geographic coordinates, which were a spot in the woods right by their house. However, Stephen was furious because she lied, so he asked her to return home immediately. Unbeknownst to them, Foss overheard this conversation through his hidden surveillance system in his apartment, and he rushed out to the location before the traders. Meanwhile, despite agreeing to return home, Kyle insisted they go to the location, and when they arrived at the location, he told Declan to stay in the car. Then, as he walked through the thick forest, he discovered a heavily fenced compound, and he started climbing up the fence until a masked figure suddenly grabbed him, pulled him down to the ground. and attacked him. Luckily, Kyle managed to defend himself and used his incredible reflexes to overpower the attacker. He quickly pinned the attacker down and ripped off the mask, but then he was shocked to find that the attacker was Foss. Cornered, Foss looked at him and explained that what he did was to protect him. He also warned Kyle to forget about the past, telling him that if he didn't, he was going to put himself and the Traegers in danger. Later that evening, when the teenagers finally arrived back home, Nicole and Steven scolded them for lying to them. However, Kyle stepped forward and took all the blame, knowing that they had only done it for him. He then said something that shocked everyone, saying that he decided not to find out about the past anymore, because after what Foss told him, he didn't want to put his family in danger. Later, as Declan was about to go home, Kyle walked him out to his car. At that moment, after explaining the dangerous encounter that had happened in the woods, he asked Declan to keep it a secret between the two of them. Then, Lori came. Finally, Declan realized that they couldn't keep arguing, and because he cared about her, he confessed his feelings, and the two officially started dating. Meanwhile, inside the fenced compound in the forest, which turned out to be a secret company, the head of security, a man named Cyrus, was shown the footage of Kyle trying to climb the fence. Later, Cyrus was called by his boss, Rebecca, who just found out that Kyle was still alive, meaning that he was supposed to be dead. Cyrus could only tell her that he was still looking for more information. Upon hearing that, Rebecca ordered him to find Kyle immediately. Elsewhere, Foss received another phone call from his associate. During the call, he assured the caller that he had convinced Kyle to stop looking into his past, but the caller told him that he had to be careful because Rebecca and her company would soon send someone to find him. At home, confused by Kyle's sudden change, Nicole checked on him in his room. She then asked to talk about what had happened at the university, but Kyle refused to say anything, saying that he was fine and that he didn't need any more therapy sessions. Meanwhile, back at the company headquarters, Rebecca and Cyrus discussed Foss. It turned out that Dennis, the personnel manager who had processed Foss's sudden resignation, had mysteriously disappeared, making it clear that Foss was trying to erase his tracks. Back at home, desperate to find a way to make Kyle open up to her, Nicole called Lou Daniels, the director of the detention center where Kyle was once detained, and later that evening, she discussed what she should do to help Kyle. Upon hearing that, Steven just said that she should give Kyle some time to process it on his own, but Nicole refused because this interrupted Kyle from finding his past. On the other hand, after discovering that he had developed an incredible super hearing ability, Kyle asked Declan for his assistance to test it out. However, Declan laughed it off, thinking that it was a joke. Kyle then told Declan that he wanted to get all the information that Foss had gathered, suggesting they raid his apartment. Fortunately, Declan was ready to help. To be able to help Kyle, Declan had to postpone his date with Lori, asking her to meet him at the local carnival later that night instead. Lori, who was annoyed, decided to call Hillary to hang out with her. However, Hillary refused to come because she already had a plan to meet her secret boyfriend. Kyle and Declan then went to the security company office where Foss worked to ask the receptionist for Foss's address. The receptionist initially refused to give it, but then Declan had a clever lie, explaining that Foss was a security guard in their neighborhood who had recently helped them, so they wanted to thank him. Fortunately, the woman fell for the story and agreed to give them what they asked. Meanwhile, Cyrus successfully tracked down Foss, but Foss found out about it and surprised him with an ambush. Foss demanded to know what he wanted from him. Being faced with that question, Cyrus simply said that he knew what Foss had done and threatened him not to protect Kyle anymore. Later, Kyle and Declan headed straight to Foss's apartment building. Then, by using Kyle's super hearing, they managed to find Foss's apartment after hearing Lori and Nicole's voices. After that, as soon as Foss left the apartment, the two immediately entered the apartment and looked around. Inside, they were shocked to find out that Foss had secretly bugged their house and was keeping a close eye on them. Unfortunately, Foss returned earlier than expected, forcing the two to run out of the apartment before they had the chance to do anything with the surveillance equipment. Then, as soon as Foss stepped inside, he found his security system turned on and immediately realized that someone had been in there. As he checked the window, he saw that Kyle and Declan were running down the street. At the same time, Cyrus, who was parked outside the apartment, saw the teenagers escaping too, and he immediately followed them. Meanwhile, Kyle and Declan headed directly to the carnival to escape Foss, not knowing that they were being followed by Cyrus. Then, shortly after, Declan met Lori and left Kyle to explore the carnival on his own. At that moment, Kyle was stunned by the lights from the carnival rides, and he stood completely frozen as he watched them like a child. Soon after, Kyle ran into Amanda, who then asked him to join her on the carousel, and he gladly accompanied her. Then, as the music played, his ears suddenly picked up a distant conversation from across the park where he heard Declan and Charlie talking. At that moment, he was shocked to find out that Charlie was cheating on Amanda with Hillary. Suddenly, his focus was pulled away when he spotted Foss being held at gunpoint by Cyrus in the crowds. Seeing that, he quickly used his super hearing to find out what was going on between the two. It turned out that Cyrus had expected Foss to kill Kyle according to their boss's order, but Foss refused to do that and told Cyrus to let Kyle alone. Sometime later, Amanda was shocked when Kyle suddenly collapsed to the ground and began to seize violently. Upon seeing that, paramedics were rushed to the scene, and he was taken straight to the hospital. After a wait in the emergency room, the doctor told Stephen and Nicole about Kyle. Thankfully, he was completely stable. Meanwhile, down the hall, the hospital radiologist received a call from someone from the company. Then, Declan convinced Lori to let him see Kyle and headed straight into the hospital room. He quickly told Kyle to tell Stephen and Nicole what was really going on, saying that they were they family, and it was now that he needed them the most. Once Declan left, Nicole came in to talk to Kyle. She then sat on the bed and explained that it was her job as his therapist to help him, but Kyle looked up at her and said that he felt like he was her actual son. Upon hearing that, Nicole couldn't hold back her tears, and said that those feelings were what had gotten in her way of helping him. On the other hand, in the hospital hallway, Lori saw Hillary and Charlie being intimate, and that was when she found out that Hillary's secret boyfriend was Charlie. Moments later, Detective Breen suddenly showed up with a couple named David and Julia Peterson, claiming that they were Kyle's parents. However, Kyle stared at them in confusion, asking who they were because he didn't recognize them at all. Later, while Kyle, Josh, and Lori talked about who the Petersons were, the Petersons were talking to Nicole and Stephen, explaining how they had lost Kyle. David explained that when Kyle went missing, they initially thought that it was a kidnapping. The couple then said that they had done an official DNA test and were just waiting for the result. They also handed over their family photo album, hoping that by looking at it, Kyle would get his memory back. Long story short, once Kyle was fully discharged from the hospital and they arrived home, he went straight to his room and went through the pages of the album. However, he still couldn't remember anything about any of the pictures. Frustrated, he then called Foss through the hidden camera and asked who the Petersons were. Kyle then went to the living room and immediately asked the Petersons questions about Adam Balin and the company logo that he accidentally drew some time ago. Nicole quickly stepped in to calm him down, but Kyle refused to calm down, saying that the Petersons were just pretending to be his family. The next morning, after being invited by Amanda, Kyle prepared to go to church to attend her confirmation ceremony. At that moment, Stephen was surprised to see Josh excitedly dressed up and joining him, knowing that he usually hated going to church. Then, as soon as the boys stepped out of the house, Stephen and Nicole stayed back in the kitchen and continued to go through the Petersons' photo album together. Upon seeing those pictures, Stephen admitted that he had gotten used to Kyle having no memories of his own. Meanwhile, at the church, after the confirmation ceremony was over, Kyle approached Amanda to give her a gift. However, Charlie suddenly pulled her away from him. Frustrated, Kyle suddenly confronted Charlie about his secret affair with Hillary. Then Kyle joined Declan, Lori, and Josh to discuss the Petersons. Declan asked if they had received the official DNA results yet, and Kyle said that he hadn't. Lori suddenly defended the Petersons, saying that they were not criminals but a normal couple who were looking for their missing son. Elsewhere, at company headquarters, Rebecca called Cyrus into her office and told him that she didn't want any of their secret human experiment to be leaked to the outside world, and she made it clear that she wanted Kyle to be neutralized. At home, Lori tried to defend Hillary about Charlie, but Hillary tried to defend her boyfriend despite knowing that Charlie was cheating on his girlfriend with Hillary. Meanwhile, Amanda visited Kyle in his room and tried to comfort him regarding his family, saying that he should be happy to finally find his parents. However, Kyle admitted that he was not happy at all. Later that evening, as the Tragers prepared to welcome the Petersons for dinner so that Kyle could spend more time with them, they suddenly received a phone call from Detective Breen, who informed them that Kyle's DNA test was an official match, meaning that Kyle was indeed the son of the Petersons. However, upon finding out about that, Kyle said that he was not going to leave with them, saying that the Tragers were the only family he knew. Sometime later, while Kyle was walking back home alone, he was unaware that Cyrus was following him. Then, he was suddenly ambushed, drugged, and kidnapped by someone. Before long, Kyle woke up on the back of a moving delivery truck, and he was so scared when fragments of scary memories from the past suddenly began popping up in his mind. Meanwhile, back at the house, Julia told Nicole and Stephen that she was afraid that her son might have changed after he went missing for quite a while. Upon hearing that, Nicole tried to comfort her, saying that she couldn't blame Kyle for being scared since he still couldn't remember them. On the other hand, deep in the dark forest, the truck finally stopped, and in that very moment, all the memories from what had actually happened in the woods on the night of the murder suddenly flooded Kyle's mind. He remembered hearing Professor William's voice as he screamed at Foss. He could also remember Foss killing Professor William to protect him from the company. Moments later, Kyle was shocked when he found out that Foss was the one who kidnapped him. Then, Cyrus suddenly started shooting at the two of them with a rifle and hit Foss in the shoulder. Shocked by the gunfire, Kyle reacted quickly by helping Foss into the car and sped away from there. However, Foss then firmly refused to be taken to a hospital because he was worried that the company would track them there. He also told Kyle to escape on his own. However, Kyle refused to leave him until he got the whole truth. Later that evening, just as David and Julia were about to leave the Traeger's house to return to their hotel, Kyle suddenly arrived at the front door and surprised everyone in the living room. At that moment, he just looked at them and simply stated that he had finally remembered them. Upon hearing that, while holding back her sadness, Nicole told the couple to get Kyle a new therapist who could help him recollect his memory once they got back home. Hearing that, Josh looked at their mother in confusion, asking why she couldn't still be his therapist. Lori agreed, saying that she knew Kyle better than anyone. However, Nicole said that the Petersons lived all the way in Connecticut, so it wouldn't be that easy to do that. Kyle then said that he would be ready to go with the Petersons by tomorrow morning. Heartbroken by that, Josh suddenly went to his bedroom. The next day at the goodbye party, while everyone seemed sad by Kyle's departure, Charlie suddenly showed up to defend himself, telling Kyle that he was not a bad guy, explaining that his affair with Hillary was just physical and that he still loved Amanda very much. However, unbeknownst to him, Hillary heard what he said and got really mad. Back at the house, Stephen and Nicole packed some of Kyle's belongings. It was clear that they still couldn't let the boy go, but Nicole said that sooner or later, this would happen to a foster home. At the party, Lori comforted Hillary, who was crying after breaking up with Charlie. Meanwhile, Kyle and Amanda tried to bid each other a proper farewell. At that moment, Amanda looked at him with tears in her eyes and said that she hoped to see him again. Then, while he was packing, Nicole went to talk to Kyle. She then noticed that he was leaving his drawings behind and told him that he should take them with him as something for him to remember them. However, Kyle refused, saying that he would simply draw new ones when he arrived at his new home. Later, as Kyle proceeded to leave, Declan suddenly arrived to see him off. Then, moments later, Josh, who had been trying to avoid seeing the departure, finally showed up to say goodbye. Kyle then bid a farewell to the rest of the Traegers, and after that, headed toward the Petersons, who were waiting in the car. Then, before getting into the car, he looked back at Declan and said that he had left something for him in his bedroom. After Kyle left, Nicole went straight to her bedroom and cried, as she couldn't contain her sadness for losing Kyle. On the other hand, Declan and Josh went to Kyle's room, where Declan found a hidden box Kyle left for him. Inside, there was a recording device with a message for him. Meanwhile, inside the moving car, Kyle tried to hold back his tears and calmly confronted the couple, knowing that the two were liars and were just pretending to be his parents. Upon hearing that, they didn't deny it. Elsewhere, Foss received a call from his associate while tending to his gunshot wound, warning him that the company would come after him soon. The person then asked what Foss had done to keep Kyle safe, and Foss explained that he had told Kyle to go with the Petersons because it was the only way to keep the Traegers out of danger. Meanwhile, back with Kyle, he recalled the final conversation he had with Foss, and soon after, the car finally pulled up to a massive, heavily gated compound in the mountains. Kyle was then taken inside, where he was completely surprised to meet the real Adam Balin standing in the courtyard. Back at the company headquarters, Rebecca and Cyrus continued their dark discussion about the future of their secret project. Rebecca then stared at her monitors, saying that subject 781228 was in excellent condition. In that same place, there was a chamber where a mysterious figure labeled XX781228 remained suspended in a thick pink slimy substance. Upon meeting Adam, Kyle was taken inside the compound. There, he witnessed with his own eyes that Adam had developed what seemed to be telekinesis, and that happened after he managed to extend his brain usage. Adam then explained that he had the superpower because he was also an experiment. When he was still an embryo, he grew in his mother's womb for 13 months, and that allowed his brain to fully develop.
Try again. The magic is in your mind. You only need to discover and release it.
Adam then explained that Kyle was actually his test subject, but the difference was that he was born in a chamber that he invented, where he was kept alive but in a deep sleep for 16 years. Because of this, he was 16 years old when he was born, and because he wasn't born to a mother, he did not have a belly button. Adam originally invented this technology to benefit humanity, but later he discovered that the company behind the development, the same one that had been terrorizing Kyle and his family, whose name was Zizix, had hidden and evil motives. Because of that, he decided to leave the company and asked Foss to stay undercover. But when he learned that the company planned to dispose of Kyle, Foss took the huge risk of saving him. After those incidents, both Kyle and Adam were facing the company's pursuit, and because of this, Kyle could only contact the Traegers for a little time every once in a while to keep them safe. And after that, Adam helped him further develop his brain to give him even stronger abilities to fight the company.
Concentrate. Free your mind.
One night, while Kyle was video chatting with Lori, he suddenly heard a loud noise. It turned out that Adam had fallen down. Seeing that, Kyle immediately asked him what happened, and Adam said that when he used his extraordinary brain power, his body began to wither. However, he added that Kyle's brain was much more advanced than his own, but still, he told him to take care of his body, or he might die young. At that moment, Kyle suddenly remembered that the network was still on, and the company might have tracked their location. Fearing that, he asked Adam if they should warn Foss so they could leave, but Adam did not plan on leaving or running away. Also, since he knew that Kyle had a more advanced brain than his own, he wanted to pass on all his research to him to help humanity. The next day, Adam taught Kyle how to use his superpowers, acting just like a father teaching his son. However, just as Kyle started to show some progress in his psychokinesis, Adam was suddenly shot and killed by the company.
He's been shot!
After that incident, Foss feared that the organization would continue pursuing Kyle, so he decided to destroy the company's headquarters, but Kyle tried to stop him because he did not want anyone else to be hurt. For Kyle's safety, Foss ignored Kyle's opposition and went to the company's headquarters alone while carrying a few bombs. However, when he entered a hidden room, he discovered a girl with the code XX781228 inside a chamber, and quickly realized that this girl was equivalent to Kyle. At the same time, Kyle, who had followed Foss, was about to enter the same room, but before he could, Foss suddenly punched him unconscious from behind, set the bombs, and dragged him out of the building.
What did you do? Get in.
Then, when Kyle woke up shortly after, he wanted to go back inside, but the headquarters suddenly exploded right before his eyes. Foss explained to Kyle that he would protect him at all costs, but Kyle did not understand his actions. Foss then said that he hoped Kyle would learn Adam's skills to become stronger, but Kyle chose to return to the Traeger's house instead, as he wanted to live a normal life and not be a heartless human. Fortunately, after a bit of convincing, Foss accepted his decision. Later, when Nicole, Steven, Lori, and Josh were still sad about Kyle leaving, he suddenly showed up at the front door. Upon seeing him, they were overjoyed, and Kyle found warmth in his home again.
All that mattered was being home with my family and knowing that I wasn't alone.
At the same time, the girl from the company headquarters appeared in the forest near the destroyed base, because it turned out that he had somehow survived the bomb explosion. Then, the next morning, the girl, who was only wearing a shirt, was walking on the street. Everything around her was completely new, and that made her curious. She then sat down next to an old man and gently touched his face, and the old man smiled back as the girl imitated his expressions. But suddenly, the girl's heartbeat accelerated when she saw Kyle standing not far away, and Kyle also felt the exact same strange feeling, but he did not think much of it and just left the area. The girl at that moment was like Kyle the first time he appeared, but she had caused a murder a few hours ago. That night, while she was still naked in the woods, a man who was camping nearby found her. Then, after drinking some vodka, he was about to do something bad to her, but she suddenly grabbed his neck and killed him on the spot. After that, she took his shirt and left. Somewhere else, the company that created the girl and Kyle was tracking her. They learned that the girl did not die during the explosion and sent a female agent named Emily Hollander to capture her. Soon, Hollander arrived at the spot where they tracked the girl and realized just how powerful the girl was when she saw a knife stuck so deep in the tree. Meanwhile, someone claiming to be the Petersons' attorney found Nicole and told her that Kyle's biological parents, the Petersons, had died in a car accident, and he asked if her family could be his permanent guardians.
Would it be all right if he spent the night here?
On the other hand, to be able to protect Kyle, Foss moved closer to him. At that moment, Kyle told Foss that he wanted to explain his condition to the Traegers, but Foss refused outright because no one could know that he was a created human, knowing that it would cause a massive panic in society. Because of that, they argued, and during their fight, Kyle's powers uncontrollably erupted, causing the glass on the roof to shatter.
And that's why you can't explain, because of that.
Luckily, his power was strong enough to prevent the entire glass from falling and cause them injuries. Meanwhile, Hollander tracked the girl to the park and soon discovered her inside a shipping container after being told by an old man. Inside, Jessie was busy tapping on something, and Hollander snuck up on her, using a tranquilizer to put her to sleep. After that, she called the company. Then, as she checked what the girl was doing earlier, she found out that the girl had drawn a lot of things on the cardboard there. She even found a portrait of Kyle, meaning that just like Kyle, Jessie could also draw whatever she sees. On the other hand, someone went to meet Kyle, and he brought him something, which turned out to be the only thing Adam had left for him. Somewhere else, The girl, who was now unable to speak, was modified by the company, making her now able to speak and work for the company under the name Jessie. After that, upon seeing her, Hollander was stunned. The company then gave Jessie her new identity as Hollander's sister, and her mission was to deal with Kyle. Meanwhile, Kyle was undergoing intense training with Foss. He tried learning how to use his superior memory. He also had to walk barefoot over red-hot charcoals to trigger his mental abilities. However, before he could practice much, he suddenly received a call to attend a party. Because of that, he decided to leave, but Foss desperately tried to stop him. Kyle, however, said that he just wanted to be normal and did not want to change the world, and after saying this, he immediately left. That day turned out to be Amanda's 2-year anniversary with Charlie. However, Charlie was still a jerk because at the party, he went and flirted with other women. Fortunately, just when he was about to do something, Declan arrived and interrupted him, so he told the girl to wait for him in a small cabin. Declan then gave him some bad news, telling him that he had better find Amanda or she would never be his anymore. It turned out that Kyle was about to tell Amanda the truth about Charlie, but he was stopped by Charlie, who arrived just in time. Then, Kyle suddenly seemed to be drawn by a familiar feeling, because it turned out that Jessie had also arrived at the party. They briefly locked eyes, but just as Kyle was about to approach, Charlie confronted him and tried to hit him, but his attack had no effect on him whatsoever. Luckily, Declan arrived just in time to stop him, and Kyle was unharmed. At that moment, the small cabin near them suddenly caught fire, and the girl whom Declan had told to wait for him was inside. Seeing this, Kyle suddenly remembered his training from earlier today and thought that he might be able to save the girl with his new power. He then quickly pulled the girl out, but she was on fire. Seeing that, Declan quickly put out the fire on both Kyle and the girl, but in the process, he realized that although his clothes were burned, Kyle's skin was not harmed. Declan was clearly puzzled, but he knew that this must be a secret that Kyle tried to keep and could not let anyone else find out, so he quickly told him to leave. However, they were caught by Nicole. Later that day, back at home, Kyle told Nicole not to ask him any questions. However, Nicole said that she did not care about his strangeness, and she was just relieved that he had saved an innocent person in the fire and came out unharmed. The next day, Hollander passed by Nicole on the street and pretended to let Nicole spill coffee on her. Nicole immediately apologized. Clearly, since Hollander was planning all this, she was not angry at all. She instead said that she had heard about Nicole before. On the other hand, feeling guilty, Nicole offered her a business card and said she would pay for her clothes' laundry. With this, Hollander's first plan to track Kyle succeeded. Later, when Nicole returned home, she got bad news because the company where Steven worked had decided to lay off Steven. The next day, Hollander visited the Traeger's house with a dry cleaning receipt and asked Nicole for help with her sick sister, Jessie. At that moment, Nicole, who had never taken on private work before, was reluctantly convinced by Hollander's pleading, especially because her husband was now unemployed, and the family needed all the extra money for their daily needs. Since returning to live with the Traegers, Kyle woke up at 4:30 a.m. every day to sneak out for special training with Foss. Because he needed to get back home before anyone else woke up, his training was limited to early mornings and after school. He knew that he needed to make his body stronger to prevent harming himself while using his powers, because a powerful brain requires a strong body to support it. One day, Foss accidentally heard on the news that the girl from the destroyed base was still alive, so he called Kyle and told him to intensify his training. He knew the company would use the girl to go after Kyle, so he had to get stronger, faster. To unlock his potential, Foss decided to do the extreme. He decided to hang 100 meters in the air without safety and asked Kyle to save him. Sure enough, Kyle managed to use his power. He flew over from several meters away and successfully saved him. Meanwhile, although Kyle's training was secret, Declan noticed him and was suspicious about his powers, so he secretly followed him and discovered that Kyle was working with Foss, whom he thought was dangerous. He then went to an internet cafe to investigate Foss but found nothing, so he snuck into the training base to take a look. However, when he returned to his car, he found a letter inside with photos of him following the boy and a note saying that Lori was in danger. One day, Kyle trained to develop a new power, and thanks to that training, while blindfolded, he was able to sense the world around him. He can see Steven tossing and turning in bed, Nicole preparing to treat her patients, Josh playing games, and Lori playing her guitar while looking sad. He was even able to see into Amanda's house, and in that exact moment, someone broke into her house. Sensing danger, Kyle hurried over to her house, and seeing that Amanda was fine, Kyle quickly chased after the person. He was ready to use his powers to search, but suddenly, a car sped toward him. Fortunately, Kyle was able to dodge it. Soon after, the police arrived, but unfortunately, no one saw the mysterious figure's face. It turned out that the intruder was a thief, and they found out that Amanda's bracelet was missing. The next day, Hollander brought Jessie to Nicole's house for treatment, and as soon as they arrived, Jessie suddenly felt a familiar sensation, and at the same time, Kyle, who was drawing, also felt that sensation. After that, Nicole took Jesse into the private room, but Kyle followed the feeling to the door. Inside, Jesse suddenly said that someone was behind the door, but when Nicole opened the door, no one was there. On the other hand, Lori was about to break up with her boyfriend, Declan.
Then we're done. I'll have my lawyer send over the paperwork.
Somewhere else, to help Amanda catch the thief, Kyle analyzed the community's bird's-eye view, and by looking at the thief's timing and location, he pinpointed the next crime scene. After that very evening, he and Lori monitored the area, and just as Kyle expected, the thief showed up. Upon seeing the person, Lori immediately called the police.
Were you in progress?
911, what's your emergency?
Next day, Amanda thanked Kyle for catching the thief. But unfortunately, the thief did not have her bracelet, and she suspected that the thief had sold it. Upon hearing that, to get Amanda's bracelet back, Kyle visited many pawn shops, and at the 7th shop, he finally found it. When they saw that bracelet, Lori was about to call the police. But then the shopkeeper explained that the bracelet had been there for 3 weeks, and he showed them a receipt proving Amanda's mother, Carol, had pawned it, meaning it was not the thief who had taken it. In order to get the bracelet back, Kyle had to pay for it. But because he did not have enough money, he exchanged the ring Adam left him for the bracelet. After that, he went to Amanda's house, but instead of giving her the bracelet right away, he asked her mother why she had pawned it. However, Amanda saw him and overheard their conversation. She then asked how he found it, but Kyle didn't know how to explain the truth to her. That evening, Kyle was thinking about the situation while lying in the bathtub when Amanda suddenly showed up. She then explained why her mother sold the bracelet, saying that they were experiencing a financial crisis. She even gave Kyle the money for compensation for buying the bracelet back. The next day, Kyle went to redeem the ring at the pawn shop, but the shopkeeper said that it had already been bought. Meanwhile, Stephen went for a job interview, and it turned out that the ring was being worn by the company's owner, Julian Ballantyne. That day, Kyle was trying out his superhuman senses at Josh's workplace. In his mind, he could see what seemed to be a letter and a postcard. However, Josh suddenly interrupted him. That caused him to feel a sharp pain. Then, out of nowhere, Jesse suddenly showed up, and the whole building shook violently as they locked eyes. Back at home, Kyle told Nicole that he could see strange things, but Nicole reassured him that it was just his imagination. After that, Kyle went to see Amanda to confide in her, but she was feeling down. Amanda then revealed that to ease her mother's financial burden, she had sold her car and her piano. Upon hearing that, Kyle immediately tried to comfort her. At that moment, a delivery man suddenly arrived with a letter, and Kyle found the exact postcard he had seen in his imagination inside the envelope. Later, Kyle went to Foss to see if he could find any clues in the things that Adam left behind. Then, as he touched a book, he suddenly slipped into a vision where he saw Adam handing him a note. Seeing him, Foss tried to bring him back to reality. He then said that the note Kyle was holding was something Kyle wrote himself, and when Kyle checked, the handwriting on it matched the writing on the postcard he received earlier. Foss also mentioned that the postcard was sent by Kyle himself, but Kyle did not remember writing it. Back home, Kyle lay in the bathtub as he recalled his past. This time, he entered a new vision where Adam told him to see the world firsthand, while saying that everything he owned belonged to him now. At this point, with his extended power, Kyle could not only relive memories, but also see them from any angle, and in his new vision, he could see the items that Adam left for him, so he rushed back to the base and quickly found the exact thing, which was a CD. He then put it into his computer to check the content, but unfortunately, all he found was static noise, meaning he was back to square one. Later, Josh's car broke down, and Stephen could not fix it, but Kyle, with his superhuman ability, fixed the car pretty easily and quickly.
It's alive!
That night, Kyle stared blankly at the CD while lying inside the bathtub, when suddenly, he had a clever idea. He then took the car stereo and connected it to the bathtub, and after that, he filled the tub with water. Sure enough, he was able to hear Adam's voice through the water, but Adam only left a few short words, and that only made Kyle confused. Later, Kyle and Lori attended a party, and while Lori was showcasing her guitar skills, Declan got distracted by Jesse, and they stepped outside to get some fresh air. Meanwhile, Kyle was still absorbed in the CD, but then, he saw some numbers on the tuning dial of the DJ and realized that each sound represented a specific letter. After that, by matching the numbers with the corresponding letters, Kyle quickly decoded the message Adam had left through the audio. It turned out that Adam was trying to tell him that Foss, who had always looked after him, was actually not trustworthy. Shortly after, Foss suddenly sent a message saying he would be leaving for a while, which left Kyle confused. The next day at school, Kyle felt unsettled, but Amanda showed up and helped him feel at ease. She then invited him to the upcoming dance, but Kyle, despite being inhumanly clever, had absolutely no idea what to do at a dance. But then, After Lori and Hillary explained the situation to him, Kyle finally realized Amanda wanted to go on a date with him. Meanwhile, Jessie started her first day at school. As soon as she entered the classroom, Charlie was completely stunned by her beauty and wanted to approach her, but when he saw her talking to Declan as if they knew each other, he was confused. Sometime later, after having some small talk with Nicole about his date with Amanda, Kyle suddenly felt that familiar feeling, so he went to find it, only to find the source of that feeling in his own room. When he checked, he found Jessie lying inside his bathtub, because it turned out that she also liked to use the bathtub as a bed. At that moment, he also noticed that the car stereo had been completely fixed. That night, Jessie was kissing passionately with Declan when Hollander suddenly interrupted them. Then, she coldly told Declan to leave because she did not allow Jessie to get close to Declan. Suddenly, Jessie felt a sharp pain in her head, and the lights around them started flickering.
You are not seeing him again. You said I should meet people.
Meanwhile, Kyle was anxious about the date and was lost in thought when Amanda came over to check on him. At that moment, Kyle gathered the courage to confess his feelings to Amanda, and when he did, she revealed that she also liked him, so they ended up watching the stars together all night.
Don't you like me?
Yeah, I do.
The next day, on the night of the dance, Kyle was eating his favorite candy when he accidentally bumped into Jessie, creating a spark of static electricity. Jessie then casually mentioned the scientific principle behind it. Kyle then asked how she had fixed the car stereo in his room. She replied that she just saw it and fixed it, but she could not explain exactly how she did it. Kyle was clearly puzzled, thinking that he might have found someone like him. When the dance started, Kyle watched Josh for a while, and then immediately joined in while imitating his moves with complete ease. The dance soon reached its peak, and Kyle and Amanda gazed deeply into each other's eyes. On the other hand, Hollander suddenly showed up and saw Jessie hugging Declan, so she grabbed her and tried to drag her away, causing the girl's powers to go out of control again. The lights suddenly flickered around them, but it did not stop Kyle from continuing his dance with Amanda. However, just as they were about to kiss, Jessie snapped, causing all the light bulbs to explode, making the event end in chaos and ruining Kyle's date with Amanda. At the same time, Kyle and Declan, who used to be close, had become strained due to Kyle hiding the truth about himself. Declan got angry and left, and because the only person that Kyle trusted, Foss, was nowhere to be found, he decided to reveal everything about himself to mend his relationship with Declan. After hearing that, Declan suddenly handed Kyle a folder with photos of him tracking Kyle, along with a warning about Lori, and after seeing that, Declan suspected that Foss was behind it all. Meanwhile, while everyone was not looking, Lori was attacked while taking out the trash after the party. The next day, Kyle felt guilty because he couldn't stop the attack on Lori, but luckily, she was okay, and only the necklace Declan had given to her was stolen from her during the incident. However, the hospital called shortly after and said that Steven's father was in critical condition. It was then revealed that Steven had not been in contact with his father for so long after a big fight between the two. However, because of his critical condition, Kyle and Steven decided to go to the hospital to visit him, but when they got there, Kyle suddenly had a severe headache. Later at home, Kyle started painting, and he ended up painting a church. Then, when the Tragers saw that picture, Steven said that his father was a member of that church, but strangely, the building had been demolished years ago, so there was no way for Kyle to know about that church. Steven believed Kyle must have seen it in a family photo, but after searching all the albums, there was no photo of the church anywhere. At the same time, Kyle himself could not explain it either. That night, Kyle was lying in the bathtub, wondering if this was yet another new superpower he just unlocked. Shortly after thinking about it, he finally fell asleep, but when he woke up the very next day, he found himself covered in paint, and there was a big painting on the wall in front of him. When he looked at the painting, he was instantly stunned. Steven was also shocked because the painting looked exactly like his father's old home, making them wonder if his father was trying to tell them something through Kyle. It turned out that Steven's father was religious, while Steven only believed in science, which caused a strain between them. Steven once even wrote a letter for his father, but his father tore it in front of his eyes, and the disappointment ruined the bond between them. Later that day, Steven took his father's favorite Bible to the hospital, believing that this was the message his father was trying to pass on to Kyle. At that moment, Kyle once again concentrated on the old man and tried to see if he could uncover anything. After Kyle returned home, Amanda showed up and found Kyle looking at the painting. Then, after hearing what it was all about from Kyle, she suggested that maybe the old man wanted to tell him something. So, to find the truth, that very evening, Kyle visited the old man again, and from that visit, he uncovered two mysterious numbers, 15 and 11, but he could not figure out what they meant. At that moment, Steven suddenly remembered his father's favorite passage in the Bible, and he immediately opened it. Sure enough, there was a piece of paper inside, and it was the exact letter Stephen had written to his father. It turned out that his father had not only kept the letter intact, but he had also carefully preserved it. After finding out about this, Stephen finally realized that his father still loved him so much. In the end, Stephen was able to forgive his father. He also thanked Kyle for being part of his life, and Kyle, feeling happy to be accepted by the Traegers, was also grateful. On the other hand, Lori discovered her lost necklace inside her locker at school. She was sure that it was stolen, and finding it there clearly shocked her. Meanwhile, Jesse was brought by Hollander to the company. Later, Kyle, along with his friends and Jesse, went on a forest adventure. As they reached one point, Jesse discovered a deep scar on a tree. It turned out to be the place where she murdered someone the day she was born, but after the company's modifications, she no longer remembered the event. On the other hand, Lori walked into what seemed to be some hidden passage, and Kyle and Declan followed her inside. It turned out to be the same facility where Kyle and Jesse were made. As they walked inside, Kyle suddenly transported into a vivid past memory in his mind, where he saw Adam frantically opening a safe, but getting captured before he could escape. Then, as he was about to be taken away, his friend named Taylor pushed him into a room. From that memory and the insight from Declan, Kyle finally learned that the person who betrayed Adam was actually not Foss but Taylor. After checking the place, Kyle found the real safe from his memory, but unfortunately, he had no clue about the password. Then, he suddenly saw Foss and decided to follow it, causing him to return to the past memory, where he saw himself inside a chamber. He could see all of this because when he was still under development inside the chamber, he had copied all the organization's information, including the security camera data, which allowed him to view everything from the past. At that moment, Professor William, who was part of the development, realized that Kyle had gained self-consciousness and immediately cut off his oxygen supply to kill him, but in the end, Foss rescued him and kept him alive. Meanwhile, Jessie followed the group into the cave, and memories suddenly flooded her mind. Frightened, her emotions spiraled out of control, and her superpowers caused a dangerous gas leak. Kyle quickly realized the immediate danger, and by using the memories in his mind, he quickly found an escape route out of there. He then told everyone else to leave, but he stayed behind to save Jessie. After rescuing Jessie and getting her safely outside, Kyle went back into that place to retrieve the hidden things Adam had left for him. He successfully opened the safe, but after inhaling too much gas, he eventually collapsed just outside the place. Fortunately, Amanda's kiss revived him. After returning from the forest, Kyle took the items he had found, which were a box, and finally found Foss, who told him that the voice recording Adam left behind had been tampered with, so he wouldn't trust Foss. But Kyle already knew that Foss was completely trustworthy. After looking at the box, Kyle realized that it required a key to open, and when he inspected the keyhole, he realized that the key was actually the ring that Adam had left for him. Fortunately, when Kyle didn't know where to find the key, Stephen brought his new boss, the same guy who bought the ring Kyle was looking for, Julian Ballantyne, over for a family dinner, and while eating, Kyle noticed that Julian was wearing the ring. Kyle then used the research that Julian's company was trying to do as an excuse to come with Stephen to the company the next day. Upon arriving, Julian was eager to meet him so they could start the experiment. There, Kyle noticed that the building was heavily guarded with security cameras everywhere, and access required 2 separate retinal scans. Then, when entering the core laboratory inside the company, all metal objects had to be removed, including Julian's ring, and Kyle realized that this might be the perfect opportunity to take the item. To be able to access the security system, Kyle observed Julian's password when he entered it and then headed into the lab. After that, Julian invited Kyle to try out the advanced medical equipment, but Kyle, knowing the risk, quickly declined the offer. Later, Kyle consulted with Foss about a plan to retrieve the ring, but when Declan suddenly appeared, Foss got really mad because their secret could not be shared with others. However, to get the ring, Foss agreed to set everything aside, knowing they still needed Declan's help. Then, the 3 of them made a plan to infiltrate Julian's company. The next day, Kyle called Stephen and made an excuse so he could visit the company again. Shortly after, just as Kyle arrived at the building, Julian was about to enter the lab. To start the plan, Foss then called the office assistant away from her desk, giving Kyle the chance to sneak into Julian's private office. Then, by using the password Julian had entered from his memory, Kyle successfully accessed the company's security system, redirected the cameras, and altered the retinal scan data. At the same time, Declan intentionally spray-painted the entrance, and Foss, who was pretending to be a security guard, pretended to arrest him and pushed him into the company. Thanks to that, they successfully infiltrated the secure area. Foss then unlocked the main doors with the altered retinal scan, while Kyle locked Julian's assistant in the elevator before continuing their plan. Shortly after, just as Foss was about to enter the password to get the ring from the secure box, Lori suddenly showed up at the building to look for her father and interrupted the plan. On the other hand, Kyle discovered the dark connection between the dark company where he was developed, the Ziz, and Julian's company on the computer, and he also found out that he wasn't the only product of Zizix. Soon, Steven and the others left the core lab, so Foss quickly called Kyle to notify him to evacuate the area immediately. On the other hand, Julian entered his office and quickly realized that something was wrong, but fortunately, the security guard called him away, so he did not discover Kyle, who was still there. As Kyle and the others got into the elevator to leave, Julian suddenly pursued them from behind. Kyle, thinking quickly, told Declan to disable the elevator sensors. He then calculated the distance and time, and then pressed the elevator close button just when Julian was about to get inside. Thanks to his quick thinking, Kyle successfully retrieved the ring when Julian stretched his hand into the elevator earlier. On the other hand, Julian, who realized that his ring was gone, immediately ordered that all exits from the building be locked. Meanwhile, as they fled, Declan accidentally fell down the stairs and sprained his ankle. So, to give them enough time to escape, Foss chose to stay behind to hold the pursuer. In the end, Kyle and Declan managed to escape, but Foss was captured and locked up. Later, Taylor found Julian and told him that his ring, which had been stolen earlier, was more than just a ring, and that it had a significant value for the company. Long story short, Kyle returned home and opened the box using the ring, and the box, which had been sealed for 16 years, was finally opened. But inside was nothing more than a single photo of Adam and another woman who looked exactly like Jesse. One day, Josh played in a competition to win a car, and he was determined to win it, so he asked Kyle to help him calculate his opponent. They then observed the candidates. Kyle then told Josh that the guy in the red shirt had a fast heartbeat and seemed to be a strong competitor. The woman in high heels would last for only an hour, while another boy with an allergy could only last 10 minutes. However, Jessie was also there to compete, and Kyle could not see through her at all. As Kyle predicted, the allergic boy was eliminated first, and then the woman followed after an hour. Then, as time passed, many competitors dropped out, but Kyle seemed to have endless energy because he was still competing. He then walked over to Jessie, and during their conversation, he learned that she had many worries. Kyle then tried to comfort her, and when he touched her, he suddenly saw into her memories. After that, Kyle came clean, and told the girl that he had seen her thoughts, but when he asked her about it, she was frightened and quickly pulled away from him.
Really freaked out right now, so...
Later, to cheer Kyle on, Amanda came to the competition and brought him his favorite candy. Meanwhile, Lori's friend watched an interview video, and Josh's girlfriend saw it too. It was revealed that Josh had paid for his participation in the competition, meaning he wasn't supposed to be there at all. Then, as the guy in the red shirt was eliminated, Josh's girlfriend angrily confronted him, leading to a big argument between the two. In the end, Josh was eliminated, leaving only Jessie and Kyle. On the other hand, Lori and Declan were watching old dance videos when she discovered that Jessie was holding Lori's lost necklace at the end of the dance, revealing that the one who had knocked Lori down at the party back then was her. Lori couldn't believe it, and he decided to confront her. Meanwhile, Jessie asked Kyle to help her look into her memory. The two then held hands, and they began to see some memories from the company. As they saw Hollander's face in the vision, sparks and lights began flashing violently around them. At that moment, Jessie finally found out that Hollander was not her sister, but rather part of Zizix and was a bad person. The two were suddenly thrown backward, but luckily, they were not injured. Thanks to that incident, Kyle finally realized who Jessie really was, and when she demanded the truth, Kyle told her everything, and then he lifted his shirt to show her that he didn't have a belly button, just like her, meaning they were both products of an experiment. She then touched Kyle's belly, but Amanda walked in and saw them together. Not knowing what happened, she could not handle such a scene and left in disappointment. Kyle quickly ran after her and tried to explain the situation, but Amanda refused to believe him and left heartbroken. Sometime later, back at her home, Hollander discovered that Jessie had taken her daughter hostage. Meanwhile, Kyle was lost in thought while looking at Amanda's photo when Nicole showed up and told him that Jessie had escaped. Now aware of the truth, Jessie arrived at her birthplace. As soon as she arrived, the memories of when he killed a man came to her mind, and she was terrified of the dark side of herself. On the other hand, because of Jessie's disappearance, Nicole did not allow anyone to go outside. Later, Hollander called Kyle and told him that he must find Jessie or his family would be in danger. Afraid that the threat was real, Kyle decided to find Jessie, but when he was about to jump out of the window to leave, Nicole caught him. However, he did not have time to explain his actions, because he had to leave immediately. Back at the forest, at the riverbank, Jessie was about to end her life, but Kyle arrived just in time to stop her. Thankfully, with Kyle's comforting words, she finally stepped away from the ledge. Later, just as they were about to leave in the car, Kyle suddenly remembered the picture he had found inside the sealed box, and Foss telling him that the ring held all the information he needed. He then took out the photo and showed it to Jessie, but unfortunately, she did not recognize it. Then, when looking at the clue on the back of the photo, Kyle realized that there was a secret inside the ring. He then used the car headlamp to light the ring and revealed a map pointing directly to Route 12.
Hit the switch.
And when they were on their way there, from a restaurant sign, Kyle recognized that it was the exact spot from the photo of Adam and the woman who looked like Jessie, so they decided to stop. Once inside the restaurant, the owner mistook them for the people in the photo, but then his granddaughter approached and told the old man had mistaken them. However, the man ignored her and went on to list the exact things they liked to eat and their favorite songs. Jessie then looked through the records and found the song, but the record was missing. After that, from the owner's granddaughter, they learned that Route 12 had been washed away by floods years ago. Meanwhile, while packing her bags, Amanda found her portrait that Kyle drew. Then, as she touched it, Kyle seemed to sense something, and his mind flashed back to happy memories with Amanda. However, their moment was interrupted when Jessie barged into his memory. Kyle was terrified because she could access his thoughts without any physical contact whatsoever. But then, Jessie revealed a shocking truth. She explained that the company wanted Kyle's memories, but knowing that Jessie knew the truth, he chose to trust her anyway. The two then headed toward Route 12, and upon arrival, they found that the place was completely abandoned. But as they walked deeper into the woods, they found an old house. From the condition, it was clear that no one had lived there for a long time. Kyle soon found a hidden door, but it was locked tightly with a password. Fortunately, after some trial and error, he suddenly remembered the song the owner of the restaurant had mentioned before. Thinking that it was a clue, he quickly called Amanda for help and told her to play that music on the piano over the phone. After that, Kyle inputted the song notes, and sure enough, the door opened. Inside, they found Adam lying on a bed, which deeply confused Kyle since Adam had been shot and killed before. Kyle then tried calling out to him, and new electromagnetic waves responded. He once again attempted to communicate with Adam, using his powers, but there was no physical reaction, so he asked Jessie to help him, and when their hands touched, their powers activated, lighting up the entire room and making Adam's brainwaves respond. However, frightened by the intense power, Jessie suddenly ran away. It turned out that Jessie had infiltrated Kyle's mind and taken the precise memories the company needed. Meanwhile, Kyle chased her to a cliff, and the two ended up fighting. Kyle said that he did not want to hurt her, and he asked her why she had stolen his memories. However, Jessie refused to answer him, and suddenly jumped from the edge of the cliff. Meanwhile, the Tragers had also noticed Kyle's strange behavior. They also knew that Declan knew something about it, but Declan refused to tell them anything. Just then, Foss showed up. He realized that Nicole had figured out Kyle's anomaly, but he did not reveal Kyle's true identity because he believed that it was something Kyle needed to tell them himself. So, they decided to wait for Kyle to return. Back with Kyle at the edge of the cliff, after seeing Jessie jump off the cliff, he tried to go down to save her, but he was suddenly pulled back by Foss. Kyle then explained to him that, while he and Jessie were using their powers earlier, Jessie stole all of his memories, and he was afraid that they would fall into the hands of the company. However, Foss still forbade Kyle if he decided to go down to look for the girl, especially after seeing the cliff. He was sure that no one would survive such a fall. At that moment, Kyle asked Foss about Adam, saying that he doubted whether Adam was alive or not after seeing Adam attached to the life support before. Foss then explained it was all part of the plan, which was something arranged by the higher-ups. Upon hearing that, Kyle said that he wanted to meet the higher-ups, but Foss refused. In the end, Kyle decided to return home. Upon returning home, Kyle finally told his family the whole truth. And fortunately, despite being a bit shocked, their family still gave him great support. Kyle then said that he would take action against the company, who were going to extract his brain data. To stop them, he would destroy their main server system. However, Steven said that the lab was not connected to the main server, but he was willing to help Kyle connect to it anyway, and they decided to do the plan on the company exhibition day. On the day of the exhibition, Kyle found Julian and wanted to exchange the information in his mind for the safety of his family. However, Julian said that Kyle was of no use to him, because it turned out that he already had Jessie with him. She turned out to be okay after jumping off the cliff, and was now writing everything she had gathered from Kyle's memory inside the lab. Meanwhile, Steven was connecting to the server when Hollander discovered them, and thanks to that, they were both locked in a room. They had known that Kyle would come, and everything was a trap set by the company. However, Kyle remained completely calm, because he knew that the information that Jessie extracted from his mind was scrambled and incomplete. It could not be fully written out, and even if they tried to extract it from her brain instead, it would take 57 years to finish. Despite what Kyle told them, they still decided to extract the data from Jessie's mind, but her intense emotions during the process caused Kyle to sense something unusual. In her mind, Jesse entered a fantasy where she was happily living with Nicole's family, and at that exact moment, Kyle entered her fantasy too. In the vision, Jesse saw the news footage of the crime scene where she killed a man, Lori's scar she had caused, and the necklace she had stolen. Overwhelmed with what she saw, Jesse ran to Kyle's room and sat in the bathtub. Seeing that, Kyle tried to comfort Jesse. He then used his powers to pull her out of the fantasy, but the process generated a massive amount of energy that caused all the computer data to be lost. After that, seeing they couldn't extract anything from Jesse, the company decided to extract it straight from Kyle, and so he was then strapped to the machine. At that moment, Hollander used the opportunity to free Jesse, who then escaped and encountered Nicole in the elevator. Nicole tried to calm Jesse, who was still panicked, and asked her to help Kyle. Fortunately, Jesse agreed to help, and soon, he managed to enter Kyle's fantasy. Then, as the two held hands, their powers once again generated an immense power, causing the glass in Steven's room to shatter instantly, allowing him to run out and quickly connect the server cables. As a result, the entire server system was destroyed, and the whole building experienced a total power outage. In that moment, Jesse suddenly fainted in Nicole's arms. Meanwhile, after the power outage, Julian was fired for causing this problem behind the company's back. On the other hand, after using so much energy, Jesse was hospitalized. She wasn't as strong as Kyle, who was completely unharmed. After successfully escaping the company's evil experiment, the Tragers decided to have a candlelit dinner. On the other hand, at the hospital, Taylor showed up and claimed to be Jesse's father with a photo of Jesse and Adam that he said he had taken.
I was there. I'm the one who took the picture.
She looks like me, but
I know who she is.
Some days later, Kyle, Josh, and Lori went to an exhibition, where Kyle, after looking at a building model there, immediately pointed out a flaw in its design. Upon realizing that the boy was right, the staff was shocked, so he told his boss, who then approached Kyle, saying that his clever suggestion had saved his company $10 million. Thanks to that, they were planning to hire Kyle to work for them, but then Josh arrived and stopped them because he wanted Kyle to study medicine so he could heal his girlfriend, who had cancer. However, Kyle refused, telling him that he wanted to pursue his own dreams. Jessie soon also arrived at the exhibition, and when she met with Kyle, she immediately told him that Taylor was her father. It turned out that Taylor had also told her about the girl in the photo, who was Sarah, Adam's lover, as well as explaining that Jessie was created from Sarah's genes. The two then went to the rooftop, where Jessie invited Kyle to try their powers. However, Kyle was afraid that others might see them, so he refused to do that. Then, just as he was about to leave, he noticed that Jessie was nowhere on the rooftop, so he rushed to look below and found her standing on the ground. Later, Hillary invited Lori to watch an internet video with over 10,000 likes, where the video showed a person jumping off a tall building and landing safely, only to realize that the person who jumped was actually Jessie. Hillary thought that the video was edited, but Lori knew this wasn't edited. Meanwhile, Kyle finally found Jessie and told her not to show her power in public, explaining that the more people knew, the worse it would be for them. Fortunately, she agreed to stop. Back at home, Kyle told Nicole and Steven about what had happened. Upon hearing that, Steven quickly showed him a new video, showing Jessie in the background, showing off her ability to walk on water. Seeing that, Nicole realized the risk, so she went to see Jessie's father, Taylor, and told him about Jessie showing off her abilities. She then told him to find a way to convince her to stop. On the other hand, Jessie had become a school sensation, and during the career day event at school, Hollander found her and tried to recruit her for her company, but Kyle arrived just in time to stop her. He told Jessie once again not to show off her powers, but she refused to listen because she did not want to hide anymore. That night, Taylor came to see Kyle at the Trager's home. He showed that he had the same ring that Kyle had and said that the one that Kyle had actually belonged to Julian's father, while he was the one who brought the ring from the pawn shop. He also explained that there were prophets, and all of them wore a ring, saying that he was one of them. He knew that Kyle knew about him and Adam in the past, but he hoped that Kyle would help Jessie. The next day, the students gathered on the school rooftop to force Jessie to perform a stunt. They mocked her, and even mentioned her attack on Lori to pressure her to prove herself. In the end, Jessie agreed to do the stunt. However, when she reached the edge of the rooftop, Kyle suddenly showed up to stop her, but she was completely determined to jump. At that moment, Kyle saw a pool of water, and he used it to make Jessie slip and stumble backwards, preventing her from jumping off the edge. Embarrassed by the failure, she quickly ran off, but Kyle quickly went after her and tried to comfort her.
I didn't mean to make you look bad in front of everyone.
they all laughed at me. I felt like I was losing their approval.
That night, when Jessie returned home, Taylor checked on Jessie in her bedroom. However, as soon as he left the room, she got out of bed, went out of the window, and jumped straight down. The next day, Kyle saw that Amanda had just returned home, and he was happy to see her, but when he approached her, she told him something that confused him. So,
You were coming.
No one knows. I'm surprising my mom for her birthday.
She seemed happy, but I could sense that she was troubled.
Can we get together later?
Of course.
he sought an explanation from his family, and after a bit of explanation, he finally realized that Amanda was trying to break up with him. Kyle then went to find Amanda to talk, but she said that she could not because her mother forbade her. Her mother then showed up and told Kyle what happened, saying that Amanda had dropped out of school, blamed him for everything, and said they should never meet again. Back at home, Kyle sent Amanda an email, but by the next day, she didn't reply, so he tried emailing her again, but there was still no response. He then tried to sing a song for her through the window, but she didn't even bother to open her window because it turned out that Amanda was listening to music with headphones. She was grounded by her mother, and both her phone and computer had been taken away. When Lori and Josh saw Kyle feeling down, they gave him some relationship advice, and just then, Jessie suddenly showed up and offered to help him. She then went to Amanda's house and knocked on the door. Before opening the door, Amanda's mother entered a password. Then, when she opened it, Jessie was standing there. However, she knew that Kyle had sent Jessie there, so she refused to let her inside. Fortunately, that was Jessie's plan because what she was doing was just to find the door's password. She then told Kyle the password to Amanda's house. Kyle then mapped out the wiring diagrams of both the Traeger's house and Amanda's house on his computer. After that, Lori threw rocks at Amanda's mother's window, forcing her to pull down the curtains. Then, when everything was ready, that very night, Kyle used his power to control the current, transmitting it through the wires to Amanda's house, causing her desk lamp to go out. After that, Kyle turned on a projector, writing a message on the window for Amanda, telling her the door password and to meet him. She then entered the door password and snuck out when her mother was not paying attention. It turned out that they had set up a special playdate for Kyle and Amanda. Shortly after, Amanda finally arrived, and the two had a romantic evening together. But just as they were about to get comfortable, Amanda's mother showed up, interrupting them and immediately booking a flight for Amanda. It turned out that Jessie was jealous after seeing how close Amanda and Kyle were, so she decided to tell them to Amanda's mother. After the incident, since Kyle, Josh, and Lori had broken house rules, Nicole and Steven grounded them for 2 weeks, and all their phones were taken. Meanwhile, Jessie went out later that night, but Taylor caught her. Being confronted, she lied, saying that she was just going out to exercise. Upon hearing that, Taylor said that he had planned to start a new training program for her to make her stronger. Later, as Jessie was about to sleep, she found a CD under her pillow, and when she checked, it had the exact same symbol as the one on the old photo of Adam and Sarah. Meanwhile, Kyle opened his computer and received an email, but the content was just a single icon. Then, before he could figure it out, he suddenly heard a soft tap on the glass. It turned out to be Amanda, who had secretly snuck out of her house to stay the night at his house and explain things to her mother the next day. However, Kyle only had one bathtub for a bed, so he made a makeshift bed on the floor for himself, letting Amanda sleep in the bathtub, but as they slept, they somehow ended up sleeping together inside the bathtub. The next morning, Kyle hurriedly got out of the bathtub because he had overslept. He then quickly opened the window to let Amanda leave before anyone else discovered her, but as he opened the window, Steven, who was preparing for a thorough house cleaning, showed up and blocked the window with a ladder, forcing Kyle and Amanda to exit through the living room window instead. However, when Kyle pulled the curtain back, Josh, who was busy cleaning the windows, and he saw him and Amanda clearly, but chose to pretend not to see anything and quickly turned away. A moment later, Lori spotted Kyle and Amanda, and before Kyle could explain the situation, Nicole walked over. Fortunately, Lori decided to help, preventing Amanda from getting caught. At the same time, a welfare department staff member suddenly came by to investigate a complaint about Kyle. They all thought it was Amanda's mother. Because of this, the whole family had to undergo an investigation. Nicole told the social worker that Kyle was doing well in the house and that they were very happy he was living there. Meanwhile, Jessie showed up and found Amanda in Kyle's bedroom. Soon after, Kyle showed up. Knowing that there was an ongoing investigation in the house, he told both of the girls to leave through the window, but then Declan showed up and blocked the window to use the ladder outside to climb into Lori's room, intending to take the beer stash that he had stocked in there. Unfortunately, the noise attracted the attention of the social worker, and she immediately entered Lori's room. Just as Declan climbed down the ladder, she tried to divert the social worker's attention, giving her boyfriend enough time to escape with the beer. Meanwhile, Declan almost fell, but fortunately, he managed to hang on to the ladder. After that, since the social worker now wanted to talk to Kyle, he had to find a quick way to get Amanda out of the house. He then got an idea to distract the entire house's attention by using his power to turn on all the kitchen appliances, and when everyone wasn't looking, Amanda made her way outside the house, only to bump into her mother at the front door. It turned out that the airport staff had called her mother to report that Amanda had never boarded the plane, and her mother instantly guessed that she must be with Kyle. At this point, cornered by her mother and the situation, Amanda finally said what she had been holding back for so long. She yelled at her mother, saying that she did not care about her and never considered her feelings. She also asked her mother why she was filing complaints about Kyle, but her mother replied that she had not filed any complaints at all. Unfortunately, in the end, Amanda still had to go with her mother. Meanwhile, the social worker ended the investigation, expressing her approval of Nicole's family, and Nicole finally breathed a sigh of relief as that long day finally came to an end. That evening, Amanda went to meet Kyle to tell him that she had made up with her mother, meaning that she would no longer be forced to do things she did not like. She also told him that she had planned to get a job to help her mother out. The next day, Amanda started working as a waitress at the same coffee shop where Josh worked. Then, after Amanda was told about her job, she was left under Josh's guidance. On her very first day at work, she accidentally broke a juicer, but luckily, Kyle was there to fix it for her. That day was unusually busy because of Amanda's presence. Shortly after, Jessie came to the shop to find Kyle because she wanted to talk, but Kyle was too busy fixing machines. Seeing Kyle ignoring her, Jessie decided to leave. Kyle saw that and was about to come after her, but Amanda stopped him immediately, not wanting Kyle to get too close to the girl, knowing that their failed date the other day happened because Jessie had meddled behind their back. To avoid upsetting his girlfriend, Kyle had to listen to Amanda and stay. But then Josh noticed some money was missing from the register, and he blamed Kyle and Amanda. Knowing Jessie was there before, Amanda suspected Jessie because she had previously stolen Lori's necklace, but Kyle did not think that it was she who took the money. In the end, to know who the real culprit was, Kyle used his powers to recall past memories, but then he found out that the cash had already been short before it was even put in the register. It turned out the manager had secretly taken the money that morning for a personal date, and Josh had been too busy teaching Amanda the job to count the money beforehand, causing him to miss it. However, Kyle could not expose the manager, knowing they might lose their job. So, to make up for the lost money, Josh tried buying some bottled promotional drinks, hoping for a big win, but Kyle calculated that the chances of winning were incredibly low. Josh finally realized this was a big mistake, but then a customer came to buy a drink and won a prize on her very first try, which made Josh annoyed. Thankfully, Josh's girlfriend gave him some money she saved for a movie to make up for the lost cash, and when the manager returned and counted the money, it was all there. Back at home, Jessie confided her frustrations to Taylor, who gently comforted her. Meanwhile, Kyle explained to Amanda about Jessie and shared a bit about his own past with her. Then, after dropping Amanda off at her house, Kyle received a text from Foss, asking him to meet at their usual spot. Shortly after Kyle arrived, it was not Foss waiting for him, but rather Adam, who turned out to be still alive. His sudden return caught Kyle off guard. On the other hand, Jessie, desperate to get stronger, decided to train non-stop for 48 hours, and when her heart rate increased rapidly during the intense training, she finally managed to move a cup with her mind. However, that had taken a severe toll on her body, and she did not realize the danger yet. Meanwhile, under Adam's guidance, Kyle also learned another power. He was now able to separate oil and water with his mind. Then, during the training, Adam told Kyle about Jessie, saying that she had been created by Taylor to counter Kyle, and thanks to that, she was now disowned by the organization. After that, to understand more about Jessie's power, Adam told Kyle to keep an eye on her. Later, Kyle learned that Steven was going to give a lecture at a university, which was also the same university where Adam and Sarah had studied. Sometime later, Kyle accidentally cut himself with a razor, and although he tried using Adam's power to heal the wound, it failed. Moments later, to make up for what had happened between them the other day, Kyle decided to invite Jessie to visit the university Sarah had attended, and she, of course, did not hesitate to come when she heard that it was Sarah's old school. At the campus, they found out that Sarah was known as the top student. She had won many trophies, but she had also stolen exam papers and even sabotaged the research building's lecture hall to cheat on an exam. Later, the two went to the lecture hall to find more information, and despite the time that had passed, they still could find evidence of Sarah's antics there. Then, they were led by Steven to face the university's best IT guy. The guy believed that no one would be able to break his system, but fortunately, he didn't realize what he was about to see. Kyle then began to break his system, while Jessie quickly cracked it, even locking Kyle's computer in the process. In that moment, Kyle realized that she had become better than him. In the process, a guy suddenly approached and said that he had seen Jessie somewhere before. She and Kyle were then brought to the pool club room. It turned out Sarah used to be the school's pool champion, and her skills were legendary, with no one having broken her record since. Upon seeing that, Jessie became intrigued to try her skill, and despite Kyle's objections, she still picked up the cue and started playing. With her ability, every single shot she made was perfect. In that moment, Kyle finally noticed Jesse's obsession with being the best, which was just like Sarah's. Kyle clearly did not want her to end up like that, so he decided to challenge her to a game. Kyle quickly cleared his balls, leaving just one more shot to win, but Jessie used her telekinesis power to make him miss his final shot. Jessie then started her turn, and he cleared her balls pretty easily, leaving Kyle amazed. She then let him take the final shot, but she used her powers to stop the ball from going into the pocket. However, that was when her nose began to bleed, and it was clear that she had used too much of her power. Seeing that, Kyle tried to stop Jessie from playing, knowing it would soon be too dangerous for her, but when he was about to pull her away from the table, he was stopped by an aggressive guy. Kyle tried to defend himself without attacking the guy, not wanting to cause more problems. Luckily, Declan showed up soon after, and he beat the guy. The fight caused a commotion, but luckily, Jessie and Kyle managed to escape safely. After the incident, Kyle noticed that Jessie had hurt her hand, so he wanted to take her to the hospital immediately. However, the wound suddenly healed, thanks to her power, and that was something that Kyle hadn't been able to do yet. But then, when her saw her nose bleed, he knew something was wrong, and she suddenly lost her balance. Kyle insisted that they seek medical help, but Jessie said that she was fine before she suddenly passed out. Later that day, Kyle told Adam about everything that happened that day. Adam then said that, just like Sarah, Jessie needed someone to truly care for her, so he told Kyle that it was his own decision how to care for her. That night, when Kyle returned home, he ran into Josh's girlfriend, who was going to the hospital the next day for a checkup. She explained that if things turned out badly, she would no longer be able to see Josh, so the teenager gave her a comforting hug. At that moment, the lights in the house suddenly started flickering, and it was actually Kyle using his powers. He then went to the mirror and found that he was also bleeding from his nose, just like Jessie. The next day, Josh's girlfriend, who had been battling cancer, was miraculously healed after Kyle hugged her. After receiving the good news, she hugged everyone happily. However, in that moment, Jessie immediately noticed something, so she asked Kyle about it. Kyle explained that he might have unconsciously treated her when he offered her a comforting hug. It turned out that intense emotional impact could also improve someone's health, and that was a new superpower he had just discovered. Kyle suddenly felt a stinging pain in his head. Seeing that, Jessie explained that using his powers was causing his body to become completely overwhelmed. It was proved when his nose suddenly bled again. In the middle of the night, Kyle wandered into the kitchen and drew chaotic patterns on a piece of paper with ketchup. Nicole and Steven thought that he was sleepwalking, so they took him back to his room to sleep, but they were absolutely stunned when they found that the room was filled with drawings of the same pattern. The next day, Kyle realized that he had been sleepwalking, but Nicole said that it was simply due to stress, so he went to the library to relieve the tension, but then he found out that even without concentrating, he was able to hear Jessie humming from 100 meters away. He then asked her why she was humming so loudly in the library, which confused her because she was barely causing any noise. Back at home, while cooking for Steven, Kyle lost control of his powers again and accidentally used salt instead of flour for the sushi. Upon seeing that, Nicole told him to rest in his room. Later in his room, when Kyle played the record that Jessie had given him, he blinked and suddenly saw the walls covered in new drawings. Nicole came in shortly after and was shocked to see the wall had been covered with drawings. She realized that Kyle had sleepwalked again. Noticing the strangeness that occurred in him, Kyle asked Jessie for help to see what was going on in his head, but she could not figure it out despite using all her powers. After that, to help him relax, Amanda gave Kyle a body massage, but as soon as she left for a while, Kyle felt his head buzzing painfully, and all the surrounding sounds echoed loudly in his mind. He tried hard to control himself, but instead caused trouble. Nicole and the others saw his deteriorating condition and realized they could not fix it themselves, so they called Adam for help. Upon checking Kyle's room, Adam saw the record and immediately knew the cause of the problem. He knew that it was a record left behind by Sarah, who had cleverly converted images into sound data. He speculated that there might be some important information hidden in the recorded noise, so he told Kyle to focus and listen for a different sound within the track. Sure enough, Kyle could clearly hear another sound, and that noise had caused the sleepwalking. The drawings Kyle made were actually the information hidden inside the record. He then uploaded the pictures to his computer, and after a bit of processing, the drawings formed a clear image of the prophet's ring. Upon seeing the image, Adam said that it was Sarah's unique prophet's ring. 3 distinct words then appeared on the screen, saying, "I'm alive." Adam could not believe that Sarah was still alive. The two thought that this might be some code she left for Kyle. After finding out about this, Adam told Kyle not to tell Jessie because he did not want Taylor to know about this as well. Back home, Kyle received an anonymous email asking him to keep a secret. After reading the message, Kyle replied to ask if it was from Sarah, but no one replied to him. Meanwhile, Taylor had a video call with the prophets. He explained that he wanted to prove that creating Jessie was the right decision, and he planned to surprise them with her advanced abilities. Later, Kyle played basketball with Declan. After the game, Jessie approached Declan and said that she knew his foot was injured, so she offered to treat him for free, but only on the condition saying that Kyle should never know about it. Declan agreed, but he still had some doubts about her skills, so Jessie decided to prove it to him. By controlling the magnetic field of atomic structures, she was able to make nearby objects float. This demonstration finally convinced Declan, and he let her treat his injury. Thanks to Jessie's treatment, Declan was able to train again without any issues. However, Kyle noticed something was off with Declan's heartbeat, and Declan quickly admitted that Jessie had treated his foot injury, which left Kyle amazed by her abilities. That night, Kyle received another anonymous email, and this time the person asked him to help Jessie. So, the next day, when he found her training her power, he told her to stop because he did not want her to strain her body. However, she refused to listen to him. She explained that she had to obey her father, Taylor, who was her only family, and then she resumed her training. Upon returning home, Kyle told Nicole about the situation, hoping she could help Jessie. After hearing the story from Kyle, Nicole went to Taylor to ask him to stop pushing Jessie so hard for her own health, but Taylor threatened her and told her not to interfere with his plan. Kyle learned more about his powers from yet another anonymous email. However, he still could not understand what the messages meant, so with Josh's help, he started tracking the email address. By analyzing the data from the previous emails, they pinpointed 4 different locations that formed a perfect square, and after some careful analysis, they realized that the exact middle point of the square was a restaurant Kyle had visited before. Armed with that information, Kyle went there and found a woman sitting inside wearing the prophet's ring. Shockingly, that woman was Sarah, and she was indeed still alive. She then told Kyle that the prophets were just cold scientists with no emotions, explaining that she had faked her death to escape them completely. She also told Kyle that she did not want Jessie to be used as a mere tool by Taylor and hoped that Kyle could help her, but at the same time, she did not want Jessie to know that she was still alive. Meanwhile, Taylor was preparing for Jessie to meet the prophets to prove his success, and for that, she started training even harder. Knowing that, Kyle told her to stop, but she would not listen to him. Thinking there was no other way, Kyle finally revealed that Sarah was still alive, and since he had told her about it, he now had to figure out a way for Jessie to meet her. To avoid Taylor finding out, Kyle arranged for Sarah and Kyle to meet at his house. He told Jessie to wait there while he went with Declan to find Sarah. The two soon arrived at the restaurant, but unfortunately, they found no clues about Sarah's whereabouts. Fortunately, Declan was able to match the car to the right person based on their age and attire. So, to see which car belonged to Sarah, Kyle tried to remember the cars he saw the day he met Sarah. Based on their ages and clothing, they concluded that Sarah drove a gray sedan, and then, by using the road surveillance camera, they successfully found her address. Upon meeting with Sarah, Kyle told her that Jessie wanted to meet her. Knowing that Kyle had revealed to Jessie that she was still alive, Sarah was very angry. But after Kyle's sincere persuasion, saying that she was like a mother to Jessie, she finally agreed to meet her in the afternoon. When Jessie heard the wonderful news, she excitedly gave Kyle a hug. She even got a new haircut just like Sarah's. Then, when the doorbell rang later that day, Jessie happily went to open the door, but it turned out to be Taylor instead. Knowing Taylor was just using her, Jessie no longer listened to his orders, as all that she wanted now was to meet Sarah. In the end, seeing that he clearly wouldn't be able to handle all the treasures, he had no choice but to leave. By evening, Sarah still had not arrived, and Jessie, completely heartbroken, left the house. That night, the Tragers held a serious meeting. Since Jessie had no home, they needed to figure out how to give her one, and after some discussion, they decided to officially let her stay in their house. Afterward, Kyle went to the restaurant to find Jessie, only to find out that Sarah never showed up to meet her. Jessie, clearly heartbroken, finally lost control of her emotions, causing the restaurant to suddenly shake violently while the lights flickered. In that moment, her nose began to bleed. Kyle tried to comfort her, but he was too stunned by her immense powers. Suddenly, Sarah appeared, and soon after, Jessie passed out with her nose bleeding. Seeing that she had no heartbeat, Kyle used his own powers to save her, causing him to faint. Fortunately, Jessie was successfully revived, and she finally got to meet Sarah. After the incident with Jessie, Foss went to meet Taylor and gave him a one-way plane ticket, telling him to leave and never come back. Meanwhile, the prophets saw the entire process when Kyle saved Jessie. They were very surprised by his abilities, so they wanted to see him in person. This season 3 starts with a prom night that should be a happy moment for Kyle and his friends. Everyone is celebrating their graduation and change of life after going through a lot of things together. Kyle and Amanda look closer. They even plan to spend the night together at the hotel after the prom party is over. On the other hand, the relationship between Lori and Declan is getting worse. Lori decides to move on after Declan gives her a chance to choose her own path. The atmosphere of the night is mixed between happiness, sadness, and uncertainty about their future after graduating from school. However, everything changes drastically when Kyle is suddenly surrounded by mysterious people who are related to the Latnock organization. Kyle is confused and brought to a secret place. When he realizes, he finds himself trapped and Amanda disappears without a trace. Kyle starts to panic because the only thing on his mind is Amanda's presence. The Latnock organization again shows interest in Kyle because they consider Kyle as an extraordinary individual to be studied. They see Kyle as a scientific research object, not an ordinary human. This situation makes Kyle realize that the normal life he has been trying to live may never really happen. Meanwhile, Steven's family and Kyle's friends begin to realize that something is not right. They try to find out about the existence of Kyle and Amanda while facing their own personal problems. The tension begins to increase because the threat from the Latnock is now closer than before. On the other hand, after Kyle was kidnapped by the mysterious Latnock organization, Kyle wakes up in a Latnock building, where he tries to escape and save Amanda from the Latnock gang. Jesse comes to help Kyle when he feels that Kyle is in trouble, but he has to leave Sarah to do it.
Amanda.
Put the girl down.
Go!
Kyle goes to meet a stranger at an exhibition that reveals to him that his soul is in danger. Because he is worried about Amanda's safety, Kyle becomes very possessive of him.
I understand that you're upset, and I'm sorry.
Look, I just need some time to think.
She doesn't want to be around me, and I don't want to let her out of my sight.
However, Amanda feels pinched by him and goes to a concert with Lori and Hillary to get rid of the pressure. Kyle then asks Jesse for help to save Amanda, but in fact he saves Jesse after an accident at the concert. Elsewhere, Lori and Hillary finally face the consequences of the kiss between Hillary and Declan.
You dumped him. Get off of me!
Kyle's concern for Amanda is getting worse because he often has a headache that hinders his preparation for an important piano recital. Sure that the Latnock is doing something other than seducing Amanda, the night he was kidnapped after the prom party, Kyle finds that his pain is caused by a device planted by the Latnock and should no longer be active after the kidnapping. Kyle asks Jesse for help to help Amanda, but Jesse's presence, who continues to be with Kyle, and his move to the Steven family's house actually makes Amanda even angrier. As part of an experiment to help Amanda, Kyle kisses Jesse, but Amanda seduces them.
Let me explain.
You are always trying to explain. I don't even care anymore because none of it matters.
Although Amanda immediately broke off their relationship, Kyle managed to give the last kiss to Amanda, who eventually destroyed the device. With a broken heart because Amanda was broken, everyone tried to entertain Kyle, including Declan and Joni, who invited him to a local bar that did not check.
You're finished.
What is it?
Bar that doesn't check ID.
After drinking too much, Kyle decided to show off his skills in order to impress the bar visitors. After the men managed to get him out of the bar, they found Joni's car had been hijacked, and in an effort to avoid contacting the parents, they dared to steal the car back from the crime scene.
Oh, no.
The scary night is not over. When Kyle was welcomed by the boss who told him that Adam Balin had died, Steven forbade Lori to have an affair with Mark, so he used Jesse's apartment as a place to escape. Nicole, Kyle, and Joni are on their way to a psychological conference, but they are in an accident when Kyle, who was driving, lost his concentration and suddenly hit the wheel to avoid another car that made the Steven family's car get out of the road before it fell into a ravine. The three of them are stranded in the woods without any means of communication, while Nicole is trapped in the car, making the situation worse. The driver of the other car is a pregnant woman named Gretchen, who then began to give birth.
Oh, mother macaroni! I think it's coming right now. Can you see anything?
I just lost my virginity. I'm not ready for this.
Just keep pushing.
Kyle came back every 5 minutes to ask Nicole's advice on how to help Gretchen's delivery, and finally managed to help the birth of the boy with Joni's help.
Stay here. Josh, stay here.
Kyle communicated telepathically with Jesse so that help could be sent. However, Nicole was treated in the hospital with severe internal bleeding. Kyle pretended to be a doctor and used his strength to try to heal Nicole, but it didn't work, so he had to turn to Cassidy, who told her that Latnock would give Nicole medicine only if Kyle was willing to join them, and Kyle agreed. Meanwhile, Lori and Jesse continued to argue, and many phone calls from Joni to Andy were not answered. But Andy finally appeared at the hospital after hearing Joni's voice full of pain. Kyle left Nicole's room and announced that Nicole would be fine. Lori apologized to Jesse for her rudeness. After Cassidy helped save Nicole's life, Kyle kept his promise and started to pay his debt to Latnock. But what Kyle found was really surprising. Latnock was not a dark and scary place, but a modern hangout for talented young people, including Mark. Even so, Kyle still didn't want to give their trust, and after his first day there, he decided not to come back, but changed his mind when he found out about his family's financial problem, which pushed him to join a competition in Latnock, hoping to win a big cash prize.
Mark can help you with that.
I really...
If you could just show me where I could work.
We'll set you up a station here.
Meanwhile, Jesse finally explained everything to Kyle, which resulted in various reactions. Still shaken by Jesse's big confession about her feelings, Kyle was confused by the love issue. While trying to find a way to face Jesse, Kyle couldn't resist his incredible jealousy over Amanda's new relationship with Nate. And what's even worse, he still doesn't trust Cassidy, but has no evidence to support his suspicion. Meanwhile, Joni and Andy faced their own problems when they tried to face the move of Andy's close family.
I want to make sure you have someone after I move.
What's your favorite part of our relationship? Well, your favorite part of our relationship will no longer be able to happen.
No, I mean, being around you, I guess.
Josh, I'm moving. Whether you accept it or not, it's happening.
You know, I thought you'd be the one fighting to keep us together.
After finding Sarah's Latnock ring at Cassidy's warehouse, Kyle and Jesse had to face the impact. Desperate to find out what happened to their mother, Jesse won't stop until she finds the truth. However, when she began to experience a serious side effect, Kyle was worried that the truth would actually hurt Jesse more. The two investigated and were surprised to find that Sarah never left Jesse and was actually killed by Cassidy.
Concentrate on the night you left Latnock and went back to the apartment.
I read the letter.
But Sarah didn't write the letter, remember?
He had his dog with him. When I got back to the apartment, Cassidy was already there in the hall.
What did you see when you got back?
He was going to do his laundry.
Has to be something. What did you see?
Blood.
Meanwhile, Declan forced Lori and Hillary to finally make peace while Joni struggled to face Andy's departure.
I don't think this is all for show. I think he really likes her. You know what? We've been fighting for weeks over something Declan started, and now he's completely moved on.
Now that Kyle and Jesse know the true story behind Sarah's death, they try to find out what Cassidy really wants from them. But to do it, Kyle has to do something he has never done before: lying. To make Cassidy believe him and believe that he supports Latnock, Kyle invited Cassidy to dinner. Jesse didn't react well to Cassidy's invitation and can't imagine why Kyle wants to be friends with the person who killed his mother.
Mr. Cassidy.
It's Michael, please.
However, when Jesse suddenly appeared at dinner that night and the situation became chaotic, Kyle, Jesse, and Voss planned a plan to bring Jesse's death so that Kyle could get closer to Latnock and find out their plan.
Jesse. It didn't happen that way.
So you killed her. You took everything from me.
Jesse, I'm sorry.
They're gone.
Meanwhile, Amanda found an old document from Balin in Nate's bedroom, and Joni planned a perfect night for the last night with Andy. In the last episode of this series, Kyle managed to make Cassidy open about Latnock's plan for the future of Adam Balin's experiment. With fear, Kyle found out that the secret group would continue to produce many clones of himself. Kyle and Jesse have to find a way to stop him, and he asked for help from the Steven, Declan, and Amanda families. However, with the world that thought Jesse was dead and Kyle trying to defend all the lies he had told, Kyle then found out that Cassidy was his own biological brother.
You still wear Adam's Latnock ring. Why are you doing this?
Nicole had been right when she said she didn't recognize the person I'd become. The person I had been before would have never done this.
Starting with Amanda. I'm your brother.